to the public hearing in West Valley City of the Utah Independent Redistricting Commission. We appreciate your attendance, and this is our final public hearing. We are accepting public comment through today, and we will be considering that as we make our final decisions on the maps. So with that, we're grateful to have all of the members of the commission with us today. And as we start, I want to share a brief presentation about the process that we've been using as a commission, and to make sure everybody has some sense of what the commission has been up to over the last half a year or so. So in 2018, as you're likely aware, the voters approved Proposition 4. And that created the Independent Redistricting Commission. The commission was then refined through a legislative compromise that resulted in Senate Bill 200. And that was in 2020. And as a result of that compromise, the commission is an advisory commission to the legislature. So we will, after we have adopted our final set of 12 maps, we will make a presentation to the legislature on November 1st of the maps that the commission is recommending. There will be 3 maps for each type of district: 3 for Congress, 3 for the state Senate, 3 for the state House, and 3 for the state school board. And we'll talk some about those maps today, but most importantly, we're here to hear your input on your perspectives of this process. As we noted, it's a 7-member commission. 3 of our members were appointed by the Republican leadership in the legislature. That was Commissioner Bishop, Commissioner Hilliard. They were both appointed as partisan appointees. And then Commissioner Baker was appointed as an independent on the commission. The Democratic leadership in the legislature also appointed 3 people. Commissioner Durham, Commissioner Hale were the partisan appointees, and then Commissioner Thorne was the independent appointee by the Democrats in the legislature. And then I was appointed by Governor Cox as chair. Our charge, as we've mentioned, is to produce a set of maps that will be then presented to the legislature for their consideration. The commission was established, we were appointed in February, and we then went about organizing. And in the early months of our organizing, we learned a lot about redistricting. We were not experts in redistricting prior to this process. And so we had to learn all about different kinds of terms, whether that be things like cracking or packing, or even the ideas of deviations among districts. So we had that process going up through August. Now, normally, in a normal year, we would have received census data in late April, and we would have been able to start drawing maps at that point. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we didn't receive census data until the 12th of August. And it then took some time to get it into the mapping software. And so since the end of August, we have been drawing maps. As we draw maps, we've been in map drawing teams. And those map drawing teams have been designed to have a bipartisan flavor, if you will. So that we have 2 teams of 2 and 1 team of 3. The teams of 2 each had somebody who was appointed by a Republican and a Democrat. And the team of 3 has 2 that were appointed by the Republicans and 1 appointed by the Democrat. Of the 2 appointed by the Republicans, 1 was an independent. So that map drawing team is Commissioner Baker, Commissioner Durham, and Commissioner Bishop. Commissioner Hale and I were a map drawing team, and then Commissioner Thorne and Commissioner Hilliard were a map drawing team. I must say I've been really proud of our map drawing teams. They've been very diligent, spending hundreds and hundreds of hours considering maps, refining maps, and doing all of that, paying attention to a set of criteria that we were given in the statute. I'll talk about that now. The first criteria that we have, and the one that is common across all states, is the criteria for equal population among the districts. In the 1960s, the Supreme Court ruled that there's a principle of 1 person, 1 vote. And that requires that each district have essentially the same population. And for Congress, that gives us a target population of 817,904. Now, we have heard from legal counsel and others that especially at Congress, having a deviation that approaches zero is ideal for the congressional maps. Now, for the other map districts, we've been told that we could have a higher deviation, but the further you get away from the standard, the more open you are to legal challenges, but also the more important it is that you have criteria that are driving those deviations, that those deviations are not just whimsical, but they're purposeful. And so if you have a deviation that is caused because you followed one of the criteria, you can justify that deviation. Where if your deviation is simply because you thought it made the line look prettier, that it may be much more difficult to justify, even if that kind of resonates with the map drawers. For the state Senate, our target is 112,814. For the state House, it's 43,622. And for the state school board, it's 218,108. Now, with each of those, we essentially have drawn each map independent of the other maps, so that as we think about Congress, we then think independently about the state House and the state school board. Now, that doesn't mean that our thinking on those other maps doesn't influence what we're doing, because certainly as we get to know the state, we hear public comment, and we get more familiar with communities across the state, that flavors and shapes all of our maps. So aside from equal population, one of the other criteria we have is contiguity. So each part of the district must be touching another part of the district. So we couldn't, for example, say we want to take part of West Valley City and part of Holiday and put those in the same district unless they were otherwise connected across those populations. Now, the challenge in doing something like that, of say, putting Holiday and West Valley City together in, say, a state House district where you only have 43,000 people, is you would have to have essentially a really small line connecting the two areas. And that would violate our principle of compactness. Our principle of compactness is that we want to avoid odd shapes or contortions that can't be reasonably explained by other legitimate criteria. Now, you will note when you look at our maps, there are some odd shapes, but most of those odd shapes are due to things like municipal boundaries. Municipal boundaries, if you have not paid attention to Utah city boundaries, they are quite odd shaped. And it's that our cities have grown and developed in a way that makes them very different from when they started out, in many cases, 100 or 75 years ago, or even in some cases with some of our more recent cities, even those that started in the last 25 years, they have had annexations and other growth that has caused their boundaries to change over time. And so, but again, we want to, where possible, to have those districts to be reasonably compact. And there are a variety of measures, and we may well have some of our experts talk about issues like compactness again later today. One of the other criteria that we have are communities of interest. A community of interest is a group of people in a contiguous geographic area that share common policy interests. Those may be driven by cultural issues, religious issues, social issues, economic issues, or other issues that may not necessarily coincide with the boundaries of a political subdivision. So it could be something like a neighborhood, for example, or it could be something like everybody goes and shops in the same community from another community, and they might consider that all part of their economic community that they share. We see that, for example, in parts of rural Utah, where there may be very distinct communities on one level, but on another level, they're economically very connected, and they want to see those tied together if possible. But a community of interest cannot be based on a relationship with a political party, an incumbent, or a political candidate. So it can't be driven by the politics of the community. Another criteria that we have is using geographic boundaries. So where possible, we are encouraged to follow natural geographic or man-made features. So that may be something like the Colorado River. It could be something like I-15, or it could even be something like a major street that divides a community. So where possible, we want to use those if they're natural dividers. But there are some times where we look on a map and we might say, it looks like there's a natural divider at, say, 39th South. And we just are kind of eyeballing that. And when we come to the community, if that's not a natural divider, we would appreciate the community telling us so that we can get that right. And so that if we can then change it to a barrier or a divider that makes more sense to the community. One of the other criteria we have is the cores of prior districts. It simply says that the commission shall, to the extent practicable, preserve the cores of prior districts. This is one that we have gotten analysis. We note that it can be challenging to maintain the cores of prior districts, in part because the growth patterns across the state of Utah over the last 10 years have not been equal. We have seen much more dramatic growth, for example, in southwest Salt Lake County than we have in, say, northeast Salt Lake County. And so as a result of that, the patterns of representation, for example, in the House of Representatives, has to shift essentially away from the northeast part of Salt Lake County down to the southwest part of Salt Lake County. And that requires that the boundaries end up changing some shapes. But that said, we still want to be paying attention to that, and we don't want to ignore the cores of prior districts. We've been asked, where possible, to try and keep cities and counties whole. As our principle, it says, to submit maps which minimize the deviation of the division of municipalities and counties across multiple districts. Now, that's not always going to be possible. There are, in the House, for example, where we have a target of just over 43,000, there are a number of cities that are larger than 43,000. And so those will have to be split. Now, what is a greater challenge is in a place like Salt Lake County, where essentially we are wall-to-wall city from the north to the south and the east to the west. When we have to make a split in a city, like, say, West Valley City, that then bleeds over into the neighboring communities. And so even if a community has even, say, 50 or 60,000 people, it may not be able to keep that city in one district and just a part of another. It may end up splitting that community. But where possible, we have been trying to minimize those splits. And then we've been tasked with the challenge of boundary agreement. And boundary agreement essentially suggests that we should be able to nest districts on top of each other. Now, the difficulty in doing that in Utah is that we have, for example, 75 House seats, and we have 29 Senate seats. And 29 doesn't divide into 75 nice and evenly. And so we can't have nicely nested Senate and House seats. We can't even necessarily do that with Congress. We could technically do that with the school districts in the House. But the problem that we've found when we try to do that is that we run into school board boundaries that make it difficult for us to do that. But we have been trying to pay attention to that, and where possible. And Commissioner Baker has actually been quite focused on reminding of this. He's by his profession, he's a GIS analyst and has worked in county precincting, among other things, and knows the value of having lines that are similar across districts. And so he is encouraging us, where possible, to use consistent lines across districts, which will make the life of voters, but also of county clerks, much more manageable. The last criteria that we have is what we call the purposeful or undue favoring. And I'll just read that criteria. The commission will, to the extent practicable, prohibit the purposeful or undue favoring or disfavoring of an incumbent elected official, a candidate or prospective candidate for elective office, or a political party. And then we note that the commission will not use residential addresses of incumbents, candidates, or prospective candidates in creating proposed maps. So one of the things that the commission has decided, in addition to not looking at those specific addresses of incumbents or candidates, we have also chosen explicitly to not look at political data when we're drawing our maps. And so if you ask us where the voting precincts are that vote primarily for Republicans or vote primarily for Democrats, we have no idea. We have not seen that data in this mapping process. And so the decisions that we make when we're in our mapping rooms are devoid of that kind of information. Now, I will note that we have made an effort to be very transparent in this process. And so our mapping teams, when they've been in their rooms mapping, we've been broadcasting those on YouTube. And so if you want to watch them, you can. I know we have a few diehards who have gone back and watched some of those to see why was it that we drew the line on 5th South versus 4th South. And we appreciate folks that have been willing to do that and to give us feedback when we get those lines wrong, or even to tell us if we did a good job. We appreciate that as well. But that gives you some feel for the broad set of criteria that we've been using as we've been drawing these maps. Our challenge now is, one, making sure we're continuing to take into account the public feedback that we receive, but also to finalize a set of maps that we will deliver to the legislature in just over a week now. And so our staff is feverishly working on helping us write a report. And we're in the throes of getting closer to be ready to present to the legislature on November 1st. Is there anything that any member of the commission would like to add to that kind of overview? I do. Please, Commissioner Hilliard.
I had an interesting question put to me after our last town hall meeting. And the question was, what are you doing about rights of minority voters? And so that you understand that under the U.S. Supreme Court decisions in 1960s, one man, one vote becomes very, very important. It's really frustrating as you do districts. For example, Logan City is 53,000. So we can have one district there if we decide that or cut it some way, but we can't put it all together. And so we have to figure out how you do that. And it all comes in voting blocks. So when we look at the map, it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. One piece may have 2 voters in it. One may have 160 voters in it. And so we try to put these lines. And so when people look at some of our maps, say, wow, that's really strange how you've done that. We've been driven by numbers and by the voting districts because we can't split them up. We have to figure it like a jigsaw puzzle. And it's got to come out right. So if on the congressional district, we're 500 short of the 817,000 or 500 short in 3 districts, we've got to make it up with 1,500 in the other district because we can't have areas not represented. But the point back, the Federal Voting Act requires us to not discriminate against minorities. And what that basically means is we cannot sit down as we do our maps, say, well, here, minority here, let's put a district together with them. But when we get through just looking at streets and numbers and population, then they look at it and say, you drew your lines in such a way that you discriminate against the minority. And at that point, we have to go back and change it. So it can't be a reason for how we drew the lines, but it can be a reason for us to go back and redo the lines. And I think we've been told by our experts who look at it, that's not an issue with how the minorities have been represented in the state of Utah. We have a number of minority legislators and how it's done. So that's another federal issue we have to look at as we do the whole thing.
Yeah, thank you. And I think when you said voting blocks, you actually meant census blocks. Yeah, just to let everybody know, because as Commissioner Hilliard often reminds us that there's some 77,000 census blocks across the state, and they aren't equal in size, either in geography or in population. And so he's very on point when he says you can have a census block that has 500 people in one area and 3 people in another. And if it is that you're trying to if you need another 200 people to get an even district, you can't split that census block that has 500 people in it. You have to use the whole block. That's the way that our legal standard focuses. Joey, I believe that you're going to be making our presentation today on public participation. And this is in part, many people have probably already seen the website, but to give you, if you haven't, you've still got time today to be giving us more feedback, even outside of the hearing today.
Okay, can everybody see that up on the projectors? Okay. I'm gonna have to kind of look back like this. So we just wanted to briefly go over the website just to show you, and like Chair Facer has said, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but it is the last day to give public comment. So we just want to show all the tools that we have for you to do that. So probably now, since we have the draft maps, one of the most helpful ways to give public comment is, oh, by the way, our website is UIRC.Utah.GOV. It's also on those flyers. If you scroll down, Soraya, you can see all of our drafted maps. And so you can click on any specific one, and you can actually view the commission's drafted maps and comment on each individual one. So let's say you don't like a specific map, but you do like a specific map. You can fill out that field on the left right over there and say, hey, I don't like this map because it splits West Valley into 3 districts or whatever. The more specific, the better, because we give these to the commissioners for them to adjust maps and to make them better. The way we see it is nobody knows the city and the community better than the people that live in it, as hard as we can try. So the better we can get a description of that, the more accurately the commission can try to represent you. And Soraya, if you go back to the website, if you scroll up and then go to participate and just click participate there, you can map a community of interest, like Chair Facer was talking about, by clicking there, and there's a tutorial how to do that. But Soraya, if you go back, if you just want to give, and scroll down, Soraya, if you just want to give a comment without drawing anything or looking at the maps, but just a comment in general about redistricting as a whole, you can email us at UIRCcomments@Utah.gov, or you can fill out this form and the commissioners will get it. On the website, you can also view the events that we're, or any more hearings that we're going to have, any more meetings that we're going to have, and you can stay up to date with the latest news. You can find our social media accounts there and pretty much everything you need. Does anybody have any questions about the website? Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. We now to ask Gordon Haight, our executive director, to give us some guidance on how we'll manage the public hearing today.
Again, we appreciate everybody coming out today. This is wonderful. What we'd like to do is we'll have a timer up for everybody to be able to give a 5-minute comment to the commission. And after the end, if you want any explanation about how the website or anything about that, we have staff here that can kind of help you understand and go through that. So that's all.
We've got 2 comments that we'd like to make. And so Commissioner Durham and then Commissioner Hilliard.
Thank you very much.
Oh, your microphone. Nope, down. Yep.
Thank you very much. Getting the technology right is always a challenge. I just want to make a comment on the record because this is an open meeting and it is being recorded. Last evening at our hearing, we heard a comment from the mayor of Salt Lake County, Mayor Jenny Wilson. And during her comments, and I couldn't hear it very well, and I didn't understand the reference, but she used my name. And I understand that it may have created some implication or suggestion that I had discussed the map work of the commission with someone outside the commission. And I simply want to declare on the record that I have never discussed commission work or any of the commission maps with anyone anywhere, nor did I participate, if that was the implication, in the development, the lobbying, the creation, and the subsequent negotiations around Prop 4 and the legislation that ultimately created this committee. I don't know why she was using my name or in what connection, but I wanted to make that clear on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hilliard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I think you need to understand the fast track we're on. We didn't get our figures until the middle of August, and then we couldn't really work on them until about the 1st of September. I know Commissioner Thorne and I have worked together, and my wife wanted me to count them, but I'm sure it's over 25 days. But I've driven from Logan to the Taylorsville office building, worked generally most of the day and driven home at night. And so it's taken really a lot of time. But the point is this: we have tried to put our maps up so people could look at them. And if you look at a map, a lot of the comments we get is, I don't like that. Well, that doesn't help us. You need to really say, now we're at this point, at our last meeting in Harriman, we came up with 3 school board maps, 3 House maps, and 3 Senate maps. Now we're going to be working on them to fine tune them and get at some of the glitches we want, but that's where we need your help on. So you need to look at those 9 maps that we've already approved, and don't just say, I don't like them. Please say, I don't like where you drew the line in Taylorsville, and you should have drawn it here. But keep in mind, we've got to balance out the population. So if you say, well, I think this 10,000 group area should be included in our House district, we can't do it because of the population. And that's an objective standard that we have to meet. So I think that's really important. We still have to work out the congressional district. And again, when we get through, we'll submit it to the legislative committee a week from Monday afternoon at 2:00 and give them why we did what we did. We'll have a report. You'll be able to hear all of that and make our presentation to them, but they will make the final decision. So our recommendations to them, they can adopt them exactly as do. They can take them and modify them, or they can reject them. But that's going to be their decision and not ours. So that's why we're submitting 3 maps for each of these areas as the statute requires us to do. But they're not the same. They're all different. And I think each one of us on the committee would say, well, I don't like this part of that map or this part of that map, but we're not the final say. So we're just submitting what we think, not considering politics, not considering where people live. But this is how we would draw the state of Utah in maps. And I should add, you could probably do 100 different maps and still meet the criteria of compactness and that, as long as you don't involve yourself in the, like I say, the minority issues or the political issues.
Thank you. And I do want to note, and I really appreciate the work that the commission has put in. As Commissioner Hilliard mentioned that, he's probably had 25 days where he's driven from Logan down to Taylorsville. I do want people to note that the commissioners are not being compensated for those. They're not even getting mileage reimbursement on those days. We do on the days that we have a formal public meeting. But I really appreciate the commitment and energy that each of the commissioners have put into this. It really has been really positive. And one of the things that we heard on Thursday night when we were in Harriman, we have a national expert, Professor Persley from Stanford, who's helping us. And one of the things that he noted was the positive way in which our commission has functioned, especially when you contrast that with some of the other commissions that have really sadly become quite dysfunctional in other parts of the country. And I'm very grateful to my colleagues for that willingness to work on this so diligently. What we'd like to do now is open up the floor to public comments. And we did not ask people to sign up beforehand, but what we would ask is that you proceed in an orderly fashion. And we'll have a timer up on the screen, I believe, Joey. And we would encourage you to share your perspective with us and help us understand your perspective on the maps and the mapping process that we have gone through. So we invite whoever would like to go first.
Should I? Okay.
Yeah, and if you will, tell us your name and where you're from, please.
George Zinn. I live up Zinn. I live up in the University District. Got a little bit of bias. Go Utes. That's all I'll say about that. You talked about like lines and boundaries and everything. I can't think of a more crazy state than Delaware that just zigzags all over the place. So you think about lines and things and boundaries are completely arbitrary anyway. And the comment that I wanted to make is that I don't know if you've thought about, it's outside my district, but how about the point of the mountain area? Have we thought about what's going to happen down there in the next 10 years? When that prison disappears, we don't know what's going to, what it's going to change and evolve to, whether it be a mall and, what kind of median age will take over that area. And, I think we have to kind of look at, have we ever considered what's going to happen? I think that's in Draper, isn't it? That's the Draper district. And I don't know if you've considered, well, over the next projection over the next 10 years or so, what's going to happen with that area as far as how we're going to consider boundaries and where we're going to place our lines and stuff like that.
Sure. And
So
just
that's the end of what I had to
a
say.
quick response is that one of the challenges that we have is we have to use the census data as it was determined based on the April 1st, 2020 date. And so the data that we have has the population from the prison that's there. And even though we know that that's going to go away, we still have to use that population in Draper for that block.
But it won't be the same in the next 10-year projection.
That's right.
And we just don't know. We had any idea what they're going to do yet at all.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted that to bring that into consideration.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, honorable members of the commission, I'm grateful that you came out here for a public hearing. I would first like to point out, like, if you're concerned about the ruling in Reynolds versus Simmons, I believe Reynolds versus Sims, the reasoning behind one person, one vote, you can discriminate just on the basis of strict scrutiny. But I wanted to bring up a point, the fact that, you mentioned that you were learning a little bit about redistricting and how you were learning about terms like packing and cracking. Well, according to this map, it doesn't look like, it looks like this, that Salt Lake County has been cracked. I noticed that, well, like this last election cycle, I was talking with a good friend of mine. He lived just across the street in West Valley City, and 56 West was the divider. And we were talking about congressional representatives, and I was like, yeah, Chris Stewart, this is who he is. And he's like, I've never heard of him. The people that's being advertised across the street was Rob Bishop and Ben McAdams, and we went to the same high school. And I'm looking at this currently. My name is Caleb Curtis. I live in Taylorsville currently, right next to the Kearns Post Office. And I noticed on this map that that would be, I don't know exactly which congressional district it is.
Now, do you know which map?
Yeah,
Can
we
you-
got 20 of them.
Yeah, can you
Well, I
tell us
mean,
what
I've
map
got
you're looking
the
at?
general congressional district map up.
So
Does it have a color or a title
It
at the
has
top?
color.
What color and number is it?
So this is, I think the one I have is purple.
okay.
So, yeah, so like that's where I would be living, in that purple district. And my father, who lives in West Valley, and that's where I grew up, lives about 10 minutes away. He would be in this light blue district. And it looks like would have different congressional representatives. And I'm concerned about that because I have more in common with my father than I believe my father would have in common with my grandmother down in Sevier County, just outside of Cousharam. And so it appears that Salt Lake County has been targeted almost for cracking. And I would like to propose that perhaps the area of Salt Lake County, like maybe you can make a small district out of Salt Lake County and then put the remainder of the people in Salt Lake County who don't fit into there into like a Provo, Utah County area. Just, it seems like, it just seems to me, this is suspicious of it being cracked. And I'll offer you time to comment if you would like.
Commissioner Hilliard.
Thank you for your comments. When you draw the line, wherever you draw the line, you have a problem. So we took the south half of Salt Lake County and put it one district, took the north half and put it with Davis County, say, just for example. Where you draw the line, I'm sure you're going to have people who live on opposite sides of the line. They're going to say, wait a minute, I don't have anything to do with Harriman. That's way out there. I don't know anything about Harriman. I want to be with my brother who lives across this line 2 blocks. And That's just the problem when you have a line. And of course, we need to get that kind of impact, community of interest. But I think I found enough meeting in Salt Lake. You're not all the same. So I could take parts of Taylorsville. That's probably not all the same in that area. And so we just try to do the best we can. So I just say, whenever you draw a line, you have a problem.
Well, I understand that, Commissioner Hilliard. I would just like to point out the fact that you can draw lines that would keep the majority of people in Salt Lake County who have similar interests that would accommodate for that interest. And then you could group the rural areas. Like I mentioned, my grandparent or my grandma and my uncle, they live in Sevier County. They have a farm. We don't have farms in Salt Lakes. You know, we don't have the same types of interests. So when you're arguing at like at a district level or a national level, like the interests that are being represented, it doesn't seem like my interests here in Salt Lake will be represented because, you know, it's been diluted because of the cracking that's been done that groups a lot of these rural areas in with the metropolitan or the greater metro areas.
Well, thank you. And one of the challenges that we have is that we're constrained somewhat by our geography. We've got at least 75, almost 80% of the people who live along the Wasatch Front. And so if we created a district that had only along the Wasatch Front, relatively compact districts, we would then end up with a ring district that wouldn't even be all rural because it would still include places like Logan and St. George. And it's my friend Commissioner Hilliard points out that they would then be responsible for going from Grouse Creek up to Daggett County, down to Blanding, and then over to St. George. And that would be a very difficult district to manage. I believe Commissioner Bishop has said that he would have been happy to do that until his staff told him that that traveling that district would be nightmarish. I think may have been part of the way he described it. But we appreciate the perspective, and we have heard that people want to keep Salt Lake together. But as Commissioner Hilliard notes, trying to figure out where to draw that line is part of our challenge.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben LaRiviere. I live in the Liberty Wells neighborhood of Salt Lake City. And first of all, I just wanted to thank you all for your hard work. Anyone who's tried to draw these lines should know it's very complicated, very difficult. There's no way to get it perfect. And I just appreciate your work. I appreciate your distinguished careers, and very happy that Utah has an independent redistricting committee. So thank you. And then my comments, I want to focus around the federal congressional districts. And looking at the maps that have been drawn, my opinion is that the orange map and the purple map are both really good. I think they do a great job of keeping community interests together. In Salt Lake City, I think we do have different interests than people in Sevier County, and both groups should have some representation. So I just think, that the purple map and the orange map are great. And then I also want to make a comment on the green map. As far as I can tell, this looks like it was based on the 2010 map. Am I correct in assuming it was based on 2010 and adjusted for population? Is that how the green map was come about roughly? Okay, we will hear that in a few minutes. From what I can tell, it looks very similar to the 2010 map. And a few months ago, I was looking around. I don't know if it's still on Wikipedia, but on Wikipedia's page on gerrymandering, the Utah 4th Congressional District was an example. So if you want to learn about what gerrymandering looks like, the 2010 map in Utah is an excellent example. So even if partisan data wasn't used in this round, if it's based off of the 2010 map where partisan data was used, then I think that is problematic. I think that does, like the commenter before me said, I assume he was looking at the green map. The green map is a textbook example of cracking the Salt Lake City area. And you've drawn some other maps that are excellent. But this one, from my perspective, looks like we're trying to dilute the power of those who live in Salt Lake County. And the other maps are great. And there's been a lot of talk about making sure every district has some rural and some urban representation, some rural and urban population. To me, that doesn't sound like a very compelling argument. That's not a standard we use for state legislative districts, for the state Senate and the state House of Representatives. To me, that sounds like a post hoc justification for why we would split up Salt Lake County. And I know that you all have good intentions. You're all trying to do your best. And I think, again, the orange and purple maps are excellent. But if we go with the green map, I just think it would be pretty clear to the public that we don't really care about the 2018 referendum that created the Independent Redistricting Commission, because that is, it to me looks very much like the 2010 map. So just want to close by saying thank you for your work. I would express my strong opposition to green map and strong support for the orange and purple map. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments, because I appreciate acknowledging how difficult this whole thing is. You know, we've had legal counsel, Professor Pursley, who teaches at Stanford, who's done a lot of maps all across the United States. His review that I took from our meeting, last meeting, is that none of these maps that we have that you're looking at are gerrymandered maps. And as you look at them, and I haven't gotten the exact count, but I would like to know as I get into it, how many of these maps, what percent is rural and what percent is urban. I think a difference I have is defining urban as only Salt Lake. Urban to me is Provo, Salt Lake, Davis, and Weber County. And so when you take those, and I'd also throw in Logan, and I throw in St. George, because Logan, although the county is rural, Logan City is not. Neither is St. George, I don't think. So I think when you take those together, you'll find that any of these maps you take, about 75% of the maps on a congressional district are what I define urban. They're either Utah, Salt Lake, Wasatch, Weber or Davis counties. And the rural is only about 25%. Now, it's interesting, one of the first meetings we had was in San Juan County, and they said, you got to go back to the way it was and give each county a senator. So that then we had 29 senators who then could represent, so that we in San Juan County could have a senator who, state senator who could represent us. And you just can't do that anymore. But I think when you look at that, and I get a little nervous when I have people say to me, oh, you're gerrymandering. That's the way it's said. When we've had legal counsel totally outside of this thing, look at our plans and say that we all of these, even though they're different, meet basic legal requirements to be valid maps. And so I have to take that as my standard and not have somebody say, well, because when you take all four counties together, the rural county, the urban counties, you end up with 75 to 80% of the representation. And certainly somebody in Sevier County, the limit, are not going to control the person voted who lives in the district is based in Salt Lake County or Utah County. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, other public comments, please.
Hello, my name is CJ. I am a 6th grade math teacher at Jefferson Junior High in Granite School District. I first wanted to thank you for all that you do and for getting public input from the community. It sounds cliche, but I love teaching because of my kiddos. I currently have 189 students who trust me, which sounds like a lot, and it is, trust me. I used to teach elementary, 30 to 180, big change. They tell me their secrets, their fears, their school drama, which I can live without, but it's fine. I'll sit and listen. They come in 15 minutes before the bell rings to hang out in my classroom with me because they know that it's a safe place where they can be themselves. The biggest challenge this year I'm facing is actually having 189 students who legit tell me every single thing. I've had 3 children who tell me they don't want to live, 2 that have tried, but were thankfully unsuccessful, and 1 who's been in rehab, and he's 11. And it's weird, but that's what makes Granite School District so unique, is that I can be there for my students and I can take some of their baggage and I can put it with me and they can just tell me whatever they want. The fact that teachers, students, staff. We've all overcome so many challenges and obstacles, yet we're all in a room together for 45 to 50 minutes a day, and we enjoy each other's company, and they know I can trust them and they can trust me. I know that many people don't see that the Utah State Board of Education boundaries are not as exciting or maybe as controversial as the congressional or legislative boundaries, but they are still so important. So again, thank you. I know that the commission has recommended 3 maps to the legislature. Words are hard. These maps do a good job of keeping school districts intact wherever possible. However, the commission maps have a very low population deviation from what we saw. And I would love to encourage the commission to utilize reasonable population deviations, plus or minus 5%, between the USBE districts to maintain that local education agency integrity that I know teachers, staff, students, parents all rely on. And that's it.
Thank you.
Could I just ask
Yes.
ask a favor essentially? To the extent you think those maps have missed the agencies and the educational units that are important, could you submit a public comment today to that effect so that because we're going back and refining all of our maps after today and taking into account all the public comment we've heard and seeing what we can fix. So
Yes.
if you can give us details on that, that would be very helpful.
I will go do that right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Specific as you can would be helpful.
I will definitely try that. I'm a teacher, so I got you. Thank you.
Please, Commissioner Hilliard.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the great job teachers do in the state, and we want to listen to you. I think Commissioner Thorne and I started the orange map, which I think was approved, would be one considering. And we started out on the basis that we wanted to put school districts together. And in Utah, every county has a school district. Now, some counties have more than one. And that became the real problem when we did Utah County. You've got Nebo and Alpine, and then Provo City's one, and they're all bigger than one district. So how do you draw the line to do that? We were able to get district lines. So as we looked at it, we could see that. We could not see the feeder to schools. In other words, if we're going to cut Granite School District in some way, we don't know where the kids from Granger High School come to get in Granger. And what Commissioner Thorne and I did, we spent, I think, 2 days just going through our map, that orange map, to keep cities together as closely as we could. You can't do it exactly, but we tried to. Now, we didn't get the time to look at school districts because they were going to get school districts to us. So we look at that. But again, the thing we don't know, I don't think we know, is the feeder schools. So when we divide a Granite this brings out another issue. I was in the legislature when we divided Jordan from Canyon from Jordan. I did not approve that. My own personal feeling is that I think that they ought to have across the board. And there's a difference in cultural levels between Canyon up on the hill and Jordan down, but that's happened. And so when I hear people say, well, Salt Lake County is all the same, I say, tell Jordan and Canyons that because they split from each other because there's obviously some difference. But really appreciate getting that information to us as quick. We're not done. Commissioner Thorne and I are probably going to spend all next week, especially on that public education one, to get it as close as we can into feeder schools.
Yeah, can I just say one thing? First of all, thank you for what you do. I'm assuming if you were in elementary that now you're in middle school or junior high, middle school, then I appreciate what you're doing. As an old school teacher, I understand. You're in the middle school. That is the toughest age group to deal with kids. You have the hardest job. I was always in high school. If I'd been in middle school, I probably would have killed somebody, but you were great. So I appreciate what you were doing. And I also appreciate you bringing the fact that the school board maps are important. The school board is important, even though there is a distinction between the state school board as well as local boards. And I also appreciate the concept there that, there are 5 different school districts in Salt Lake County, and they're there for a reason. But I just want to let you know, it takes courage to come up and speak in these settings. Thank you for doing it. I'm very proud of what you're doing. You've got a noble profession. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today. Thank you for your work as an educator. And I just wanted to comment too that the Commission Executive Director and our Chair have been meeting with school boards and superintendents as well to get their input, and having that input from those school board members, from the superintendents, and from educators like you is really valuable to us. So thank you very much. Oh, and also we've had UEA come to our meetings as well and comment and submit maps as well. So thank you for that input.
My name is Brent Goodfellow, and I live in West Valley. And I've been through what you're going through, 1990, 2000. And I appreciate all the work you're doing and the fact you're going throughout the state to have input. I guess one of the worries that I have is that once your work is done, then you hand it over to the legislature and then they decide what they're going to do. And they haven't traveled the state. At least the committee hasn't. What I would suggest, that probably can't happen, but I would suggest that you have a joint committee with the legislative committee, and every time they meet, you meet with them and you defend your position, because they're going to change it. And if you met with them, you would speak out the reasons that you have made the decisions you did, and we'd come up with a much better map than just saying your work is done, now turn over to the legislature. And like somebody said, they may ignore it. And that would be a terrible thing, but that may be just what happens. Thank you.
Please, Commissioner Durham.
Thank you so much for your comment. I personally agree with you. It'd be a great thing, but it's not up to us. And thus far, the legislature has evinced no interest in meeting with us. But the one thing we are going to do is to prepare as detailed a report as we could get done in the time allotted to us, outlining the rationale behind our decisions and supporting the maps that we're going to submit. So at least that report will be available to the legislative committee, and it will be available to the public.
I do want to note that the legislative committee has held a series of public meetings across the state. Now, one of the things that has been different from those public meetings from ours is that we have had maps available that we've been drawing that the public has been able to respond to. The legislative committee has not publicly released any maps yet. And so that is one of the significant differences in the way that the public hearings have been held, but they have been meeting across the state. Commissioner Hilliard.
Thank you. Good to see you, Brent. Enjoyed working with you in the legislature. And I think your Senate district is probably one of the most difficult ones we draw, because it involves Magna, West Valley, Tooele, and it's just kind of where everything kind of comes together in a mix. But I would share what Commissioner Fisher said. The legislative committee has been meeting across the state. And I think I went to their meeting in Logan just to personally watch it. And I didn't want to really get involved in their discussion, but they have not put out maps. We have. So you can look at our maps and say, yeah, I don't like that at all. But I don't think our job will be through on November 1st. One of the real issues we have, they've got to have the redistricting in place and passed by law before January 1st. Because January 1st, you start collecting signatures if you want to run for a political office. So that's the real pressure we're under, is trying to get it done that quickly. And so it would be better, I agree, if we started in April and could meet and do all those things, but as a practical matter, we couldn't. So before you get too negative to the legislative committee, they're like herding 104 cats. We only have 7 of us to herd. Thanks.
Well,
Commissioner Bishop.
Brant, once again, thank you for being here and for your service in the legislature. You did, I think, point out a problem, structural problem, that we should look at if indeed this happens again 10 years from now. I won't be around that long, so I don't care. But 10 years from now, if we do this stuff again, the idea of having this working with the legislature closer, I think, is a very wise thing. There's also one thing that I think structurally would be helpful, and one that gives me a great deal of satisfaction, at least in the legislature, There is every part of the state that is represented by somebody who knows and understands that part of the state. We only have 7 people. Even if these were the 7 smartest people in the state of Utah, we are still bound by certain limitations on what we can bring to the table. And that is a significant problem in the structure of what we're doing. So having those 2 things working together, I think is a very wise suggestion. Oh, hell, I brought you back up for the reply, huh?
Well, I just thought of something else that I just throw out, not that you have time to do it, but if you have trouble like keeping Salt Lake County together or Utah or Davis or whatever, I think the Constitution says that you could actually increase the number of House members. Because the Constitution says we have 29 senators, but you could go up to 3 times the 29 for the House. And so you could actually have more House members. Just a thought.
If you can fit them in.
Yeah.
And once again,
recommend.
just for here, I don't think we have that power to
That's
do
correct.
it. It's a good idea. And there's a lot of ideas that can add nesting that we should recommend in the future, but we don't have that power to do it.
Yes. Thank you.
Hi there, my name's James Spann. I'm from West Valley. I'm kind of old school, so I don't use my phone. If I don't print it, I can't read it. First of all, I just want to thank the commission for your efforts in conducting these meetings and working with the proposed map. I know this has been a compressed time frame, and I think your efforts have been commendable. I've observed several meetings online, and I've been very impressed with your transparency and your candor. So I'm confident that you will recommend, your recommendations will be your best efforts under very compressed time frame. So thank you very much. I would like to share some thoughts that I think are important. It's more of a historical perspective to some degree. I grew up on the west side of Salt Lake City, and one of my earliest memories was standing in line with my parents in 1964 so they could vote for Lyndon Johnson for president. I was in the 4th grade and our class also had a mock election. Only one kid in that class voted for Barry Goldwater. Johnson won the state of Utah with 57% of the vote. Little did I realize at the time that that would be the high point in Democratic and presidential elections. There was a time when Utah Democrats were elected to office. That same year, Cal Rampton was elected his first of 3 terms as governor. Frank Moss was elected to his second of his 3 terms. The Utah State House and Senate was controlled by the Democrats. It's a ways a long time ago, but it did happen. Other Democrats elected over the years were Governor Scott Matheson for 2 terms. It was common to have Democrats in Congress over the years. Wayne Owens, Karen Shepard, Bill Orton, Jim Mathon, all served very well. Unfortunately, over the last 2 decades, electing Democrats to office has been harder and harder. Gerrymandering has created districts that just can't be competitive. The Republican Party holds a supermajority in the state house. There are no Democratic representatives at the federal level. In the 2020 election, Salt Lake County gave Joe Biden 53% of the vote. Kyle Weston had 65% of the vote. Ben McAdams had 51% of the vote. Even Greg Skordas received 49% of the vote for Attorney General. The fact is, in spite of Salt Lake County being competitive and Salt Lake City being overwhelmingly a Democratic stronghold, there are no Democratic representatives in Congress. And I think that's a shame. So over the last several election cycles, I have canvassed on the west side of Salt Lake County for several excellent Democratic candidates. On many occasions, I get the response of, why should I bother to vote? Democrats can't win in Utah. It's a hard argument to win, and it's dangerous for our country. The current party affiliation in Utah is 51% Republican, 15% Democrat, and 33% independent or unaffiliated. I've lived in Utah most of my life and several years in Texas and Kansas. I know what it's like to be a Democrat in a red state. I fully understand the numbers. I don't expect to win a majority, just a chance to win once in a while. If by some miracle Democrats suddenly won a supermajority, I would be absolutely thrilled, but I'd also be very nervous. Ruling by supermajority is not a good way to govern. It's not what the founders intended. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name's Richard Jarrick. I live in Taylorsville. And if I may, I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Facer.
Yes.
Regarding your opening remarks. You mentioned all of the, first of all, before I get into this, I want to thank everyone on the commission for all their hard work. I know you guys have put in a tremendous number of hours, and I'm very appreciative of that and of the Independent Redistricting Commission as a whole. Regarding your opening remarks, you mentioned a whole series of criteria that that the commission needs to take into account when they're drawing these various boundaries for congressional districts, Senate districts, et cetera. Did you, in that process, did you prioritize these criteria, saying that, okay, this criteria is going to be more important than that? And I don't need to get into any details here. I was just wondering how you were taking into account all these other criteria. When
the commission did not go through a formal weighting process.
Okay.
And so it really is the independent assessment of the commissioners on how they individually weight those criteria.
Is that something that you might want to do, say, 10 years from now in the future, during the next redistricting process? Is that even feasible, I guess, is one of my questions.
It's very risky because every map has all kinds of considerations. So for example, as we've looked at the assessments of all of our maps, we've noticed that when there are relatively few county splits, keeping counties and cities are both together are both priorities. But we've noticed that when our county splits are low, the city splits go up because of the numbers and because of where the boundaries are. So with every map and the purpose of the map, you've got to make individual judgments about what you're going to prioritize. And communities of interest are different all over, as well as contiguity. I mean, every single factor is important, but it would be, I think, very risky to say this is the most important factor because you'll be doing damage to many of the others.
Understood. Another question I had was regarding incumbents that find that their district, has been renumbered. Okay, say we have an incumbent that lives in, say, my district, and then that district winds up getting, according to what the legislature decides, has a new district number. Do they run in that new district under that new number?
So two things. One, the numbers that are currently on the maps are not sacrosanct. So they will likely be changed as we continue our analysis of things like cores of prior districts to try and match as best we can the existing numbers to the proposed numbers. But second, the statute requires that the state house, if I remember correctly, and the state school board, that people live in those districts where they run, and the state senate requires that they live constitutionally. It's required. Now for Congress, it's not required that they live in their district, but and we've had several examples of people not living in their district in Congress. But for the state house, senate, and school board, they'll have to run in the district in which they live.
Right. Okay. Another question I had is, okay, you're going to be submitting 3 maps for each one of these categories to the legislature. And I assume that the three maps that are on your website are basically, I understand they can undergo some refinement, but they're basically the maps that will be submitted to the legislature. Is that correct?
I'm looking over at Joey. Do we have the correct ones up yet? Yes.
And then you're going to have a presentation in front of the legislature. You're going to be submitting those three maps. Are you going to be recommending one map for each of those categories over the other? Basically just, I see from Mr. Hilliard there that it's basically you just submitting the three maps.
Yeah,
So
as of the present, we have not had any sort of a motion to recommend one map over another. But it's been to recommend the sets of maps that we individually adopt.
okay. And then with respect to the congressional maps, the 4 congressional districts, we have the 3 maps. And as a couple of the speakers have alluded to or mentioned previously, we have 2 maps that basically keep, for the most part, Utah and Salt Lake counties intact, and I guess including Davis County. And then we have another map, at least, that basically splits at least Salt Lake County and combines it with rural areas. So it seems to me a little disingenuous that you can submit both that map, which to a large extent mimics the 2010 redistricting map for congressional districts, along with these other 2 maps. And the ones I'm referring to specifically are the orange congressional number 3, draft 3.2. And the other one was the purple congressional 4, draft 3. It seems a little disingenuous that you can.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I
Sure.
just wanted to let you know, we have not yet selected our 3 congressional maps.
Oh, you have not?
No,
Okay.
we've selected 3 for each of the other categories, but we're going to be addressing the congressional maps probably today and Monday. So.
I just want to clarify the commission's draft maps are on the website, but if the commission were to adopt a public map, then those ones are not yet on our website. They're on our software.
Yeah, we
Okay.
received a number of public maps, some of which are, really good and under consideration. So please take a look. Of course, I don't know if you're going to get them in time to comment on them, but we appreciate the comments on the ones that have been identified, but they aren't yet selected by the commission.
I understand. Okay, and my members of the public can still submit comments up till the end of today on the maps that are on your website, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Getting back to my comment, it just seems a little, if you're going, those 2 maps or those 3 maps that I mentioned, the orange and purple are very similar, obviously, to an extent, but they contrast significantly with I don't remember the other map, but the one that basically cracks Salt Lake County. The green, okay. As some speakers have also mentioned previously, I think it behooves the commission to try to keep as much of Salt Lake County, Utah County, and Davis counties in their own, I recognize they're not going to be in one congressional district, but we need to keep these urban areas as intact as possible, and not combine them with rural areas in order to dilute the voting influence of the public in Salt Lake County. And that's my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hilliard.
Appreciate you coming, sir, and making your comments because we need to hear this. I think one thing you need to know is we didn't put the current numbers on because we don't want to know where the current incumbents live.
I understand.
Yeah, and so
that was a very good thing to do.
So the numbers will be changed by the legislature when they put the matter together to get the votes necessary to pass whatever they finally agree to. I think the second thing, why we haven't prioritized, I'll just give you my opinion. One thing I feel good about is we're sending out maps with different choices for the legislature to do. If our commission, if the law would have said that we have to do one map only or prioritize and do that, they should have said it in the initiative. They didn't. They just left it open. And my concern is I don't feel comfortable with any of these maps. if I were king, I'd go back and change every one of them. Because, for example, as indicated, I feel very uncomfortable about taking a map, rural map that has all of southern Utah on it. And Blanding, I don't know how much Blanding has to do with Kanab or with my favorite one, Grouse Creek. Grouse Creek. And I say that in this regard that I think just the time frame, we just don't have enough time to go through and make sure they're exactly correct. And that's what Commissioner Thorne and I are going to be doing probably for the next week and maybe 2 weeks, is going back to the orange ones that we've worked on and say, how can we make them better? And one thing we heard in our meetings is Roosevelt and Duchesne County was chopped into 3 House districts last time. And we think, in all fairness, they paid the price 10 years ago. They shouldn't pay it again. So that's going to challenge us because of where they're located. I jokingly say it's kind of like Israel with Assyria on the north and Egypt on the south. They're there and they're small, and then you have to figure out how to blend them in with the others. And so appreciate the input. And again, what we do, I'm going to walk away from saying I would have changed every one of them if I could have done it, but I can't. And I think we need to give our best thinking to the legislature so that they and their staff and can make the decision to get something that'll pass the legislature. That's the problem, whatever you suggest. And I'm glad we don't have the final say. I'm glad that we're not here doing one final map for everyone and they had to adopt it, because we haven't spent enough time to do that.
Thank you. Are there other public comments?
Yeah, my name is Daryl Curtis and I'm with the from West Valley. And I also would like to thank the commission for all that you've done. But I still am concerned that Salt Lake County is split in 3 congressional districts. I just think that that's not what I would like. And if you look at this, the purple and then the, I guess it's the orange. It's really interesting how it looks like you put Mill Creek in one district and Salt Lake City in a different district. And Mill Creek wraps around Salt Lake in one section, that one little section. And so, you know, within a matter of across the street from each other, you could be in 2 different congressional districts. And I understand you're trying to make sure everything matches and all the numbers come together. And I applaud your efforts on that. But from my perspective, it seems like you could take, okay, well, let's take some of this Mill Creek and other cities within Salt Lake County and trade off St. George, because you do still have a congressional representative that's going to go from Salt Lake clear down to St. George. And I understand part of what's going on, but it's still with 3 representatives covering Salt Lake City. It would be nice to have 1 representative somewhere that would cover our city or our county, Salt Lake County, sorry, and have that, because it still just seems fabricated and doesn't seem consistent. So that's a concern that I have as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I'm Judy Weeks-Roner, and I'm going to be the newest legislator that'll be able to vote on this. So I have been watching this quite frequently before I got this new position. And I want to just thank you for the time that you've spent. And I'm going to be looking very closely at what's happening here, because that will be my very first vote. So, and I encourage the citizens to get a hold of me for concerns that they may have about this also. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Weeks.
It's been a lot of time. So my name is Jim Visak. I want to thank you guys so much. I sit on chairs here in West Valley City. I'm very active in West Valley City. And the work that you guys are doing with the limited time, limited restraints, just to give information to the elected officials. And it may be all for naught. As a citizen of West Valley and a candidate for West Valley City Council, I just want to come up and say, I appreciate your guys' time and the effort that you guys have spent. I understand how it's so different. You guys are going around the state. When I go around the city, as I'm running for at large, I'm over in the Hunter neighborhood. Their concerns over there and what they want from the council is different than when I'm over in Chesterfield. And I'm sure you guys are seeing this throughout the state, and it makes it so hard. And I use the analogy like when you're at Thanksgiving, you got 20 people and you got 2 pumpkin pies. And you start cutting into it and think you have the right, and somebody says, oh, I want a piece of pumpkin pie. Well, now the slices aren't going to all be the same. And I mean, it's kind of a general analogy, but you know, I just wanted to thank you as a citizen of West Valley for the hard work you guys are doing. And thank you for coming here.
Thank you.
Greetings, commissioners. For people in the audience who don't know who I am, I'm Stuart Hepworth. I've attended University of Utah student and South Jordan resident. I've attended many of these meetings and submitted several maps, which the commission is considering. So I'd like to address the claim Commissioner Hilliard made a few minutes ago that the staff analyzed the commission maps 2 days ago and said that none of them were gerrymanders. As someone who attended the meeting 2 days ago.
Excuse me. I didn't say the commission. I said our legal counsel that came from Stanford who draws those indicated in the meeting that although they were diverse, they were all legally correct. Wasn't anybody but him.
The specific wording you said a few minutes ago was that they said they weren't gerrymanders.
That's right, because they were legally correct.
As someone who attended the meeting 2 days ago and stayed for the full 5 hours, I can attest that this was not what staff said. Staff analyzed the commission maps and stated that all of them were in line with compactness and county and municipality splits criteria. Though if I recall correctly, the green map did perform worse than most of the others. Staff did not do a political analysis of the commission maps, which is the relevant criteria for determining whether a map is a gerrymander. Nonpartisan Statistical Analysis 538 performed an analysis of 6 draft commission congressional maps 3 weeks ago. It characterized the current map as having 1 lean Republican district and 3 solidly Republican districts. A perfectly proportional map would have 1 lean Democratic district, 1 lean Republican district, and 2 solidly Republican districts. 5 of the 6 draft maps analyzed at the time were as close to that as the current map or closer. The green map, on the other hand, was further away from that hypothetical ideal than the current map, having 4 solidly Republican districts. There are states where the political geography strongly benefits a political party. You can't draw a Republican congressional district in Massachusetts, and it's hard to draw a compact map of Wisconsin where Democrats win more than 2 of 8 seats. At the state legislative level in Utah, Republicans are strongly favored, and it's basically impossible to draw a map where they don't win a supermajority of seats, barring a massive increase in Democratic vote share. At the congressional level, however, this is not the case, and geography actually mildly favors Democrats here. For a state to have 4 solidly Republican districts is unacceptable. Your legal statute prohibits the purposeful or undue favoring or disfavoring of a political party. You haven't been looking at political data, so you can't violate the purposeful part of that. However, and obviously I'm not your legal counsel, but I would argue that a map that disfavors the minority party even more than the current map, which was absolutely made to disfavor the minority party, unduly disfavors that political party. I would thereby posit that, even if it was not intended to, the green congressional map is a gerrymander and one that you cannot adopt without violating the statutory prohibition against the undue favoring or disfavoring of political parties. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susan Olson. Thank you for your work. I agree with very many things that have been said, so I'm going to start with just a really technical point. I used my QR reader to download the congressional district maps, and I am just really confused by the 2 orange maps, because on my little phone, you don't even get the, the very 3.0 or whatever it is. So if you expect public comment on these maps, and maybe anything past today, if today is truly the end, then I guess this doesn't matter, but it's just really hard. Those two orange maps differ from each other radically. So it's really confusing
They
to have.
they should have different labels, and I guess they're not showing
My
up.
guess is that the space may be too small on the.
Yeah,
phone.
one's
Yeah.
a 3 and one's a 3.2 and one's a 3.3, as I recall, something like that.
Yes, yes, but as I said.
Okay, you're going to have to
it's-
use your iPad.
Yeah, right. So I think that's going to be confusing for people. I assume they sort of started from the same one, but they went in radically different directions or something like that. So just a technical comment, but just since you're probably kind of counting heads, I'll weigh in on a couple of points. I agree that it's as a very long time resident of Salt Lake City, who once had the pleasure of voting for Congressman Bishop because the line went right down my street in the avenues. This was a few cycles ago. I think it's really important that Salt Lake City not be swamped with entirely rural districts. I think that the difference between urban and rural communities of interest is one of our biggest distinctions nationally. And it is important not to, that we need to work on as a society on not aggravating rural and urban differences, but I don't believe that is the function for representatives in a House of Representatives. That US senators, of course, do have the job of balancing rural and urban interests in any of their states. But the very function of the House of Representatives and the smaller districts is to create communities of interest. So I agree with, in general, the people who have felt that the residents of Salt Lake, and Salt Lake County, of course, is far too populous to keep as a single district. That's obvious. But and you have shown that there are very many ways to divide it up. But I think that, let's see, that the first one, I believe it is, the Green District appears to be a pretty egregious attempt to once again put Salt Lake City with an overwhelmingly Republican district. And so I do oppose that map. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I made this t-shirt just for you folks. Don't dilute my vote, don't dilute my voice. I think voting is almost a freedom of speech issue because you're voting for representatives. My name's Cindy Adams. I'm a fairly new resident to Murray, but I was born and raised in Utah, and then I left for about 25 years due to jobs. Came back about 3 years ago, just in time to vote for a commission, which I appreciate the work, just like everybody else has expressed that you folks have done. Was disappointed that the legislature wanted to change the vote of the people. And I remember many times when I was out of state defending Utah, even though we are a conservative state, that I felt like data drove a lot of our decisions. And I felt that it was a slap in the face by the legislature to not allow you folks to do that. And I guess I have, I've supported much of what has been said here. And I do know that, that we talk about that 75% of the state is urban, 25% is rural. But I guess when I think about communities of interest, the urban part of Salt Lake County is different than Logan or St. George. And I kind of want to make sure that that's kept in our minds. The one question I do have is, I know that I've read and heard that you folks are going to do all this work. It's going to be passed on to the legislature, and then the legislature may just totally do away with all your work. And the one question I have of that is, what can we do as citizens to try to make your work not be for naught? That would be the first question. And the other one is just regarding the congressional maps that I know that we need to comment on that you folks are working on. I do remember I didn't quite say this all the way, but coming back into Utah and just seeing the changes that 25 years ago, when somebody was talking about just Democrats and Republicans being more, talking to each other. Now it's seems a little more distant, and I appreciate the fact that you folks all work together really well. But I guess my big question really is, what can we do, and when will the congressional maps be posted? Is that something that you folks are going to post before the end of the day so that we can comment on actually the work that you folks are doing on the federal congressional districts?
So we have posted all of the maps that the commission has drawn currently, but we may not finalize the set of congressional maps yet today.
Okay.
So that may not happen today.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I could say though too, so by Monday, I think we should have some kind of determination of what our recommendations will be for congressional maps, and we still will be accepting input from the public
Through
as well. So even I think early next week, could we say that we're still accepting
Well,
input? I mean, I know we're in a crunch to prepare a report for the legislature that we need to present on November 1st, but we're still hopeful that we could take public comment for the first few days of the week next week.
I think we can try our best to entertain those. I will note to your question of what can you do. You had Representative Week come up. You also have Representative Elizabeth Waite that's here today as well, and I'm sure that they would be more than happy to talk to folks, and we would encourage you to speak to other members of the state legislature and share your perspective with them as well.
And as far as when you folks submit your reports, is that something that's going to be done at a public hearing, or
Yes, it will be a public hearing on the 1st of November at 2:00 in the Capitol complex. I don't know which room yet.
Okay, great. Anyway, and was there something you were going to say?
I was just going to follow up on the public comment issue. We will try very hard once we've made our 3-map selection to be able to look at specific comments, but to be safe, it would be a good idea if you looked at the ones you really care about, either negatively or positively, and get your comments in today.
Yeah.
Even though you don't know for sure whether we're going to select them or not.
Yeah, and I guess the one, because I have been looking.
It actually might influence the decision to select them or not.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of follow up on a couple of people, like with the green one, is I guess what I'm wondering is when that map was created, was that to kind of, I would hate to see the legislature use, that as a, what do I want to say, like as a way to say, oh, we utilize the input of the commission when if it really looked like it was kind of more kind of following what is currently now, because I do feel like that the congressional district I'm in is gerrymandered, and I'd like to see, I liked years ago, like I said, years ago when I lived in Utah 25 years ago, when I felt like whoever had the best message, got through, not necessarily what party they represented. And that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see it be back to be more data driven and not politics driven. Thank you very much for your time. And again, thank you for all that you've
coming
done.
and your comments. But let me just add, remember we first started, I have this thing, I look at social media, and I looked at a tweet that I really had to laugh about. The person said, whenever the group does redistricting, take me out of the 4th district, because I'm so sick and tired of all these negative ads, one against the other. And that's what you get, I guess. We make all the districts comparable and see what really happens with it. But I just share that with you. Some people in the 4th district were not happy that they got a contested district because of all the negative that goes back and forth that did in the 4th district.
Yeah. Well, I would like to, again, be more about data and not, because I felt like when I saw a lot of those ads, it's like, boy, they were misrepresentation. And I hate to see that in politics. I'd rather hear about what the issues are and what the data drives that. And as a financial analyst for most of my years, it's like numbers. So thank you very much.
All right, and we have an online comment from Tyler Baumsta. Oh, Tyson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Tyson.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. Thank you for being out here and taking our comments today. I'd like to share a map that I've made with you guys. This is like the 12th rendition of my map, and it's something I've been presenting over and over again with different changes to the legislative committee. And I think I have it to a point where I'm ready to share with you guys as well.
All right.
So with this map, I had like three pillars to my like methodology with making the map. First of all, I wanted to maintain county continuity as much as possible. Then I wanted, when I had to split a county, I wanted to prioritize the divide being on major roadways and geographic features. And then my last priority was I wanted to maintain most of the continuity of the old districts from 2010 so that people don't have a change in representation that confuses a lot of people. So with this map, there's 5 counties that end up getting split. The deviation total is 0.003%, or 3 people total maximum deviation. And with the 5 counties that are split, for example, Juab County in the south, I'll start south to north. It's the same split as the 2010 map. Utah County, the entire split between District 4 and District 3 is all I-15 in Utah County. I'll jump over Salt Lake County for a second. Davis County, as well as Utah, the entire split is I-15 between District 2 and 1. And then if you zoom in on Salt Lake County, as it comes into Salt Lake County in the south, it's following I-15 still. And then when it hits State Street, it goes straight up State Street that whole way for the entire District 3 and 4 boundary. The northern boundary of District 3 is Highway 266. The northern boundary of District 4 is Highway 171. And then out in Magna, it jumps up along 800 West and then follows 2400 South out of the county. And then in the northern half of Utah County, it follows I-15 down out of Davis as well, all the way down to 500 South. And then that cutout of Salt Lake County right there, it follows I-215 and then deviates from I-215 up to Highway 186. And then it basically goes flat out to 500 South with a little bit of a stepping stone. And then the last county that's split is Duchesne County. The majority of that split is Highway 36. So that's my map. Tried to keep it short for you.
Commissioner Hale.
Thank you, Tyson, for your submissions. Just a question, just to make sure I'm seeing this accurately. So Salt Lake County is divided into 4 congressional districts?
Yeah, it's 3 in the last map, and then District 1 picks up a bit of the East Bench in this map. So yes, there's 4.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Chair Facer, commissioners, thank you for your tireless service, your exemplary openness, and your eagerness to accept and integrate public comment. Oh, I'm Paul Hepworth from South Jordan. My comments today stem from the observations I made at Thursday's commission activities. If I use any names, it's because of public statements that were made there, no private conversations. I want to talk about the purpose of this commission. This is the voter-requested redistricting commission responsible for preparing district maps in an open manner, independent of partisan politics. Urban-rural split is not in your mandate. You were not tasked with producing a map the legislature can rubber stamp to perpetuate its 30-year tradition of diluting the voice of the urban center of Utah. The closest thing to an urban-rural split required of you by the legislature is the directive to consider preserving the core of existing districts. It isn't defined exactly what that means, but this commission has stated it will, if possible, use empirical methods to look at congruence of boundaries. Note that Thursday night's exercise in population density was not looking at congruence of boundaries or focused on preserving the cores of existing districts. Rather, it was a metric related to how evenly among the districts the urban and rural populations would be split, which is not one of the selection criteria this commission has adopted. The public expects you to hold true to your stated criteria. With the uneven population growth since the 2010 census and the shapes of the census blocks, I found that it's not practicable to define new districts that are congruent with the prior ones. In any case, preserving the cores is but one of many factors this commission must consider. Many factors are at odds with other factors. Neither the statute nor the commission's adopted principles gives preserving the core priority over preserving communities of interest. Note that in the statute and in this commission's guidelines, preserving communities of interest is listed first and preserving cores of prior districts is listed third. Most public comments favor preserving communities of interest. It's up to the commissioners to decide how to weigh the conflicting factors and determine which maps are best overall. Nor do the statute or the commission's adopted principles require that the commission's 3 different maps be of different classes. The statute only says who is to approve the 3 maps. The differing character of the 3 maps would naturally flow from the differing weights the approving commissioners give to the conflicting criteria and how the commissioners' votes align with each other. It is completely proper for each commissioner to vote for maps that some would consider to be of the same class. This commission has stated that it will not consider the partisan matters of political party, incumbents, candidates, and prospective candidates. The legislature, of course, can. It has done so for the last 30 years, and it is legal for it to do so. It is not legal for this commission to purposefully or unduly favor a party or candidate. The commission has adopted a willful blindness approach to such partisan matters, which covers the purposeful. But the desire to produce a map the politically motivated legislature will adopt brings the politics into this commission, contradicting this commission's position against considering political party. By contemplating whether the legislature will approve of your maps, you would destroy the independence of this commission and its very reason for existence. You would fail the majority of Utah voters who caused this commission to be created. One commissioner suggested Thursday evening that if this commission will not submit a map that satisfies the legislature's political desires, that this commission will have been a waste of money and effort. To the contrary, if this commission does submit such a map, which is motivated by the politics of the legislature, then this independent commission will have surely wasted its money and effort. I applaud Commissioner Durham, who humbly and firmly stands for the independence of this commission and for its principles. I urge all commissioners to stand with her and fulfill the commission's purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the audience? Please, Representative White, sorry.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Waite. I represent District 31, which is just across the street here in West Valley City. And I'm so grateful for the time that you have committed and dedicated to this task. As a legislator, I can tell you that we've been informed that creating a map, a House district map, to expect to take up to 30 hours or even more for that. So you might have had that information, but I wanted to make that public statement because this map, the map drawing, the mapped considerations are so time consuming. And I'm additionally grateful for you involved in that process. The comments that I've heard that so strongly reflect on the process 10 years ago have illustrated a real degree of demoralization and just such discouragement on the part of so many people. That's where my gratitude for this commission comes in. And I've been encouraging people to be sure to send comments to the commission, even if it's as little as reminding in my neighborhood, part of my little HOA community is in a different house district from mine. So that's one of the main things that I wanted to see corrected or changed in the next map, is that neighborhood stay together. I will tell you and everyone else that a real priority among the legislators is that they're looking ahead to proper and fair representation in their district, regardless of that whether and when they may be the representative. So those are comments that I've heard from both sides, and I appreciate that. The other thing that I wanted to extend to the public is just the concept of overlaying maps that are received from you with maps that the legislative committee is working on to determine the final one. The biggest encouragement that I've been giving to people who are so worried because of the process that I don't know if anybody really considered it fair or representative from 10 years ago, is that with the existence of this commission, there has been so much more public awareness, public input opportunity for people to participate in so many ways. Even at this meeting, we've seen everything from comments about a neighborhood to a full-blown congressional map submitted and offered for your consideration. So that's where I've just been encouraging people to participate, because I believe that that's part of the biggest function of this commission, is to engage. And I'm seeing extremely sincere involvement and listening to the public, particularly in this commission. So thank you again for your work. And I don't think I have any questions, but I did want to make those comments for the public to hear. I want to thank everyone who's in the room here today and listening online. I particularly am grateful to have the teachers here and the teacher community here. I'm a retired 32-year career teacher, and I'm involved in civics education. It's very meaningful to me still, and always will be, probably more and more. This is what I see as a civic duty on the part of the citizens to show up and be part of this redistricting process like we've never, ever had the opportunity to do in the state of Utah. So with so much more awareness, I'm again grateful for everybody in the room and their comments and your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair. Elizabeth, thank you for being here. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you.
Let me just say one thing you reminded me of. If you want to change the boundaries, we had no intention of cutting your HOA. We have no idea where it is. But let me say, if you want to change the boundaries, give us a suggested change. If we move the line here and by there we pick up 200 people, where can we change the line somewhere else in probably the same district? So we take 200 out of your district and put it in there. And so I just say that any district changes at this point in time, you need to give us alternatives.
And yes, and those have been submitted. This is a matter of 30 homes. So it wasn't even 200 people.
I just took a number.
So, right. And that's been part of what's baffled my neighbors, is that it's such a small number inside that white vinyl fence in a community of 30 buildings. And it's a townhome community. So that was one of the things, but I do recognize, and that's what I've encouraged people to do, that if they didn't feel like they could tackle a full map, because that's so daunting. And when we hear 30 hours, that's completely daunting. But to be able to get online and submit an email comment to define that community of interest is the level of participation that is so refreshing for people of all ages. Because the other thing that I think is really valuable with this is that it doesn't take an elected official. It's a very public invitational process. And that's what I've been so excited, again, because we didn't have this commission 10 years ago. And I remember the devastation that people experienced because they felt so helpless. And then sure enough, when the maps came out at the end, there was a real sense of lack of representation on the part of the state legislature at that time. So yeah, the opportunity to make the smallest comments or submit a big map is amazing. So thank you.
Wait, before you go, can I say there's one thing that I'm very proud of the position that you have as a state representative is that you are going to have to stand up and make a public vote on what the final map is. Then you will have to go in front of your constituents and explain in public what it is. And then you will have the opportunity of them giving you confirmation or rejection by the way they vote on what you decided to do. That is true accountability in this entire process. And that's what the legislature brings. It's an accountability that's far above what we have to do. When we are done, we go back in the woodwork and no one hears from us again. You, though, have to stand up in public and you have to be specific about why you were doing it. And let's hope in the next 10 years, the population of your HOA doesn't really change that much so you can stay together.
And it can, and it's in one of those areas. I actually have the fortune, I guess, and I hope the people feel like they're fortunate in House District 31. The place where I live is in a position that is most likely going to be further inside the boundaries where I am.
We hope that works. But once
That's-
again, your responsibility as a representative is extremely significant. And I applaud you for taking that on. And you're the one that's going to have the accountability going forward. So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, thank you.
Okay, you get to hear from me. So I'm just reading a comment that was submitted by Mayor Sean Clayton, and it's just representing the thoughts and the thoughts of the Copperton Metro Township. I think you all have a copy, but they wanted it read today. It says, "Dear Commission members, please accept the following comments on behalf of the Copperton Metro Township Council. As a Metro Township, Copperton is a fully incorporated municipality and political subdivision of this state of Utah, with virtually the same rights and responsibilities as a city or a town under Utah law. Copperton is also one of the smallest municipalities in Salt Lake County, with a population of around 894 people and an area of only 0.3125 square miles. In 1926, when Utah Copper Company created Copperton as a mining town for its employees at the Bingham Canyon Mine, it created one of Utah's earliest master planned communities. Although Copperton is the only remaining mining town for the mine, it is still surrounded by open fields and mining land that are largely owned by Rio Tinto and undeveloped. This gives Copperton the feel and character of a rural community and distinguishes it from its neighboring municipalities in Salt Lake County, which are far larger, more urban, and developing at a much faster rate. Taken together, Copperton's unique geography and history has created a tight-knit community in a small contiguous area with common policy interests, effectively making Copperton a community of interest, as the Commission describes the term in Standard 1 of its proposed threshold criteria and standards. Because of its small size and population, as well as its unique history and culture, Copperton strongly opposes any congressional, state senate, state house, or school board boundary map that would divide Copperton into multiple districts. For instance, Copperton vigorously opposes the Commission's proposed Orange Congressional 2-Draft 3 map, which would split Copperton between Congressional District 2 and 4. Such a proposal would diminish the ability of Copperton and its citizens to receive fair and effective representation from their elected representatives. Dividing Copperton into multiple districts would also require the Copperton Metro Township Council to develop and maintain relationships and open lines of communication with a disproportionately large number of elected representatives. This would create an undue burden for a community of Copperton's size and limited resources. Perhaps most importantly, dividing Copperton into multiple districts violates the intent of Utah Code 28/20/2015, 201(5)D, and Standard 4 of the Commission's proposed threshold criteria and redistricting standards, both of which state that the Commission will, to the extent practical, minimize the division of municipalities across multiple districts and preserve communities of interest. Copperton recognizes that it is not always possible or advisable to avoid dividing municipalities in every instance, and that the Commission is striving to reduce rather than eliminate such divisions. Given Copperton's small population, however, it is difficult to see how placing a few hundred Copperton residents in one district and placing their neighbors in another is necessary to comply with federal and state mandated populations constraints or other requirements. For these reasons, Copperton respectfully requests that the Commission revise the Orange Congressional 2 Draft 3 and any other map that would divide Copperton into multiple districts so that such maps leave Copperton intact. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Copperton Metro Township.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
In response to that, I'm looking at Orange Congressional District 2.3. Our staff has prepared on the back of that, all county splits and all city splits. And I don't see Copperton on there as being split. So
It's because it's a Metro Township, so our software, we look into including Metro Township, so because it's not technically a municipality, it wasn't.
Okay.
Okay.
So it wasn't apparently designated as such. So that's an easy thing to fix.
So we'll look at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the kind of input we need.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Daniel Pipkin from Midvale, and thanks for allowing public comment. I feel like I'm not as familiar as some of the people here, not as prepared. Heard about this last minute, but I just wanted to ask a quick question before I give a comment, just to clarify. There are 3 maps that are going to be submitted to the legislature, and like it's not like one map that's going to be recommended over another or anything.
That's
Okay.
correct.
So of each type, yes. So when I voted for this commission as part of the ballot initiative, the big reason is, no offense to the representatives here, but I don't trust the Utah legislature to make a fair decision when it comes to redistricting. And so I don't, what I mean by fair is, I want those communities of interest that everybody's been talking about to be preserved. And what I would hope and what I would like is for all of the maps that are submitted to have that as the first priority in them. Yeah, I can't speak for anybody else, but I can speak for myself. But I don't care what district I'm in after all of this comes through, you know, especially that this is particularly for the congressional district map, but that can change in a couple years. Who's going to be representing me as part of that district or whatever else. I don't care about the preservation as much as I care about the integrity of that community of interest. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I just give this response? The difficulty I have found in all the public town hall meetings is it isn't uncommon. It happens fairly often that we'll have 2 different people stand up, and one will say, my community of interest is this. The other says, no. The community of interest is that. And so it's really hard subjectively to define what it is. One would argue the community of interest is all Salt Lake County. It's all one community. Well, I don't think it is. I think there's differences in your county, and we can't leave it one anyway. So that's really the challenge when you say you want to make it number 1. You and I could look at a map and disagree very, very sincerely as to what are public interests, what the community interests. So that's a real tough challenge.
Yeah, and I mean, for the record, I would prefer Utah to be one district with a mixed member proportional system. I think that kind of helps address some of those geographical limitations that we run into. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is David Reese. I am very grateful for the opportunity I have to speak with you again today. I would really like to thank you very much for being so transparent. I was at the meeting on Thursday. I was able to talk to you then, and then I listened to the rest of the meeting. When I had to leave, I listened to the rest of the meeting and noticed that you guys discussed one of the maps that I submitted to you. It's one of the David Reese congressional plans. I'd like to defend a couple of my points as to why I did what I did in that map. The first thing is that it didn't split a single city. Now, I noticed in the analysis, you said it split 7. I'm thinking 2 of them may be Santaquin because it crosses county borders, and the other may have been Bluffdale because it also crosses county borders. Any other city split that happened in that map was entirely unintentional and should probably be able to be fixed. But those 2, of course, with them crossing county boundaries.
Yeah, I will note that the analysis does, I believe, and Joey can correct me if I'm wrong, but it does include 0 blocks that may have crossed.
And that's what I figured is it may also be that you can't split
on a number of
those.
our maps.
Understandable. So any deviation from cities with that one should be entirely accidental and should be able to be fixed if possible within the blocks that you guys have to deal with. The second one is it provides easily defensible rural groupings. If we aren't going to put all the rural counties together, then we have to split them up somewhere. And so I really like what Commissioner Hilliard was talking about with having very defined transportation corridors. So you have the 3 northern counties, you have the counties that follow I-60 on the eastern side, you have the counties that follow not I-60, Highway 40, forgive me, Highway 40, then the counties that follow Highway 6 and Highway 191 on the southeastern side, and then the counties that follow I-25 on the southwestern side. That's how I grouped those counties together. I find that extremely easily defensible as to why you group those counties together. The third thing is that I wanted to point out is that it doesn't, it's a fairly even split of the rural areas as well, if you remember the analysis that was performed on that. And then finally, the ways that these cities were split up in Salt Lake County was entirely along city lines. Just as Commissioner Hilliard was just mentioning, where do you draw the lines in Salt Lake County? You have to draw some somewhere. Why not just follow the city lines? They're already there. It's easily defendable, but that does result in deviations that are upwards in the 10s, 20s, 100s cases. So I understand that, but I find it extremely easy to defend. We drew this line this place because it's where the city was. And in response to Commissioner Durham's comment that it split Salt Lake County 3 times, it does. It's specifically in order to get the population that you need from the southeastern counties, you put in Utah County, great. You have to add in a little bit more. So I put the entire city of Harriman and the entire city of Draper in with those. I would point out that Harriman and Draper did not sign on to the letter that Mayor Wilson mentioned, neither did any of their neighbors. So I just want to throw that out there. But you guys then had a very long discussion about the other congressional maps that you had, and there was some disagreement in terms of splitting Salt Lake County multiple times, as well as respecting the previous districts. I took the time on Friday night and Saturday morning to actually draw a map that I think does a decent job at respecting both of those interests. If I may show it to you, it was submitted this morning. It's David Reese, 3 rural districts congressional plan. It should only take a few minutes. I hope that's okay. So again, what I did here is I kept counties completely intact other than Utah County and Salt Lake County. They're the 2 most populous counties. They both have more than half a congressional district in them. So it makes sense that those would be the 2 counties that are cut. And those are the only 2 counties that are cut. In addition, there's not a single city split. Salt Lake County and Utah County are cut entirely along city lines. Again, this makes it extremely easily defendable why you cut the counties where you cut them. And I feel that it also represents in many ways the core congressional districts that were already there. You have northern Salt Lake County and then all the way down to St. George along the western counties. You have the Provoke area of Utah County and then the eastern counties. And then you have the northern counties along with Weber County. And then I put all of Davis County in there. Again, we don't want to cut, I didn't want to cut Davis County. Not cutting the counties and not cutting the cities was one of my highest priorities. And then finally, that leaves District 4, and it just basically is shrunk down because it has the most population currently. It's shrunk down to be along city lines, and then to get the deviations as close as possible. You'll notice the maximum deviation on this one, I believe, is somewhere around 360, if that's right. 328. That maximum deviation is entirely because I took the 5 counties on the northern part of the state and put them together. In order to get a smaller deviation than that, you're going to have to cut an additional county or cut an additional city. Oh, and one final comment on the specific theme. When it comes to drawing Harriman districts, all of your guys' house districts did this, but you kept the newly annexed part of Harriman, which will include Olympia Hills, in a section that includes other parts of Harriman. So I would hope that as you do the refining of these districts, that you keep that the same way, because I'm sure that the Olympia Hills residents would appreciate that they are in the same district as the rest of the community. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We especially appreciate you taking the time since we met so recently to submit another map. So thank you. All right. Any other comments from people here in the audience? Okay, and I believe I've got one more comment online. Commissioner Hale.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Zinn, who had spoken beforehand, had just asked an additional question to clarify how the commission puts boundaries on us in a state that is 67% plus federal lands. And what about the private Native American areas, et cetera?
So the public lands issue is, I think, part of what underlies some of the conversations that we've had in trying to figure out the best strategy for grouping folks. But the lands themselves don't get represented. It's the people that get represented. And so that's part of that balance. But we assume that the people who live and work and recreate on those lands have some interest in that. And
I might add as well that you and some others met personally with members of tribal, different tribes, and received input from them as well.
Yes,
so,
thank you. All right, so we've got 2 comments online apparently. Oh, we have one more here as well. So let's go ahead and do this one, and then we'll do the online comments.
Okay. Yes, thank you. My name is Rick Gregory. I live in Salt Lake City, and I think I have questions more than comment. Is the UIRC comment at Utah.gov the appropriate venue to submit a map?
So if you have a map that is already drawn, that you did not draw in our software, you could submit it through that website or that email address, yes.
And second question is your flyer that you had on the table outside. If I distribute this to my neighbors, what is the date that they need to respond by? That was sort of loose, it seemed like earlier.
So
Can we
answer
come to a solid.
Answer A is today. Answer B is we will do the best we can to pay attention to any comments we receive in the next few days as well. But I don't have a hard and fast date that I can necessarily commit to. But as we're refining maps, if we get additional comments, we'll try and pay attention to them.
Okay, because I don't know how fast the neighbors can do anything. So today might be too much, but over the course of the weekend, perhaps. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our online comments. I'm not sure who the first one is, Joey. Okay, so Katie Wright.
Hi, this is Katie Wright, Executive Director of Better Boundaries. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay,
Katie.
great. I'm sorry that I'm not there in person, but really, I just want to say thank you so much to the whole commission for the impressive work, the expertise, the incredible time commitment, and your dedication to a transparent process that, as we've heard, is kind of unprecedented in, across the United States. And also just comment that since the beginning, you have been expertly focused on executing the standards that, of course, was set out by the statute, put in place and voted on by Utah's legislators. So I just appreciate so much your focus on the criteria and want to thank you for your work in this final stretch. And that is all.
Thank you very much, Katie. We appreciate it. All right, Joey, the other comment? So Michael Anderson, please.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, Michael Anderson. I live in Provo. I sent a map earlier. I was informed about 2 minutes ago that it included on it the, I guess, where the incumbents live, and I'm assuming that's why it can't be displayed. And I do not know how to remove that from my image that I had sent, and I don't have any time to go over it and locate it. I submitted the map on the I guess the committee's website rather than the commission's website previously.
Yes.
So my objective with the map was primarily to keep Salt Lake County in one district itself, essentially making a circle. It's describing it. It is similar to what you have in Orange 3, Draft 3.2, or Purple 4, Draft 3. However, my concern with both of those is that they each have one district that is massive in geographical size. And when I was at the committee meeting in Orem, it was mentioned that that's not desirable because one representative needs to travel extremely far, which makes sense. So my concern is that the legislature might disregard those two maps simply due to the huge geographical size of one of the districts. Particularly, someone had mentioned the south side of Utah all being in one. And in my map, which I will try to take off the incumbents and resend here as soon as I can, but in mine, there is just the one circle where Salt Lake County is, and everything else is split into 3 separate ones. And it works out perfectly. There is a deviation of 0. Every single one of the 4 counties has exactly 817,904 people in it. So I feel like something like that is the sweet spot between the different kinds of maps that you've already drawn and discussed. If I can get it properly submitted to be viewed, I think something on that lines should hopefully be examined to see if we can kind of meet the needs of having Salt Lake in one while simultaneously not having a humongous district that is probably not desirable. And I'm guessing the legislature might just disregard it just due to the geographical size. That is about all I have.
Thank you. And I imagine that, if you email staff, that, they'll be happy to talk about the technical issues of your map submission.
Will do. Thank you.
And you can do that at UIRC comments at Utah.GOV. So.
Great.
All right. One last call for any public comments. Okay. Commissioner Baker.
To my fellow commissioners, I would like to address this commission,
both as a commissioner and as a citizen. I have three main points that I would like to address. First point is my role, how I view my role as a commissioner. My role as a commissioner is to represent the will of our fellow citizens of Utah during this redistricting cycle. I feel I need to state what I will do and what I will not do as a commissioner. As all of you know, I am not a Republican and I am not a Democrat. My efforts in this endeavor have been and will continue to be for the betterment of all Utahns. I will not prepare maps, proposed maps, for the purpose of trying to impress the legislature. That is not my priority. And to do so would be to create a conflict that is disingenuous to my purpose as an independent commissioner and dishonest to my fellow citizens. The maps I have worked on to prepare and support are for the sole purpose of benefiting the citizens and only the citizens. The second point, this is the green congressional map. In our meeting on Thursday evening, the green congressional map became a source of contention for our commission. Even though I helped to create this map, I no longer support it for the following criteria-based reasons. First, the proposed green plan elevates the cores of prior districts criterion and diminishes all other criteria except for population. This criterion is incredibly and extraordinarily undefined. I do not believe it means that future districts should be a mirror image or near mirror image of current districts. Such an approach, in my view, risks ignoring the changes of Utah's population characteristics that have changed over the last 10 years. The entire theory of preserving prior districts is, to me, nothing more than primarily serving as an incumbent protection mechanism, which would clearly violate our existing other criterion, which is well-defined, that we not favor incumbents in any way. While I do not like this criterion regarding cores, I have nevertheless kept it on my table and still considered its possible positive effects that might potentially serve to benefit the citizens of a given community. Second reason, the proposed green plan splits Salt Lake County three ways. We have heard and read hundreds of comments that Salt Lake County should only be split once. We received a letter recently signed by a dozen or so Salt Lake County mayors that working with two districts in Salt Lake County, or rather in the Salt Lake area, is strongly preferred over three districts. Also, minimizing county splits is one of our obligations per the statute. Third reason, I have heard from several reliable sources, and again today, several comments, that the current congressional district between St. George and Salt Lake City was, at some time in the past, gerrymandered to disfavor a certain incumbent. While I do not know if this is true or not, I am not inclined in the proposed green plan to perpetuate even the appearance of what may have originally been a deliberately gerrymandered district, especially when other criteria and the consistent voice of many Utahns are both calling for the dismantling of this district. Fourth reason, Washington County citizens, in addition to many citizens statewide, have made clear they do not want to be connected any longer to Salt Lake County. Fifth reason, the pursuit of consensus among Utah congresspersons And Rob, this is hopefully addressing the concern I think I've heard from you. The pursuit of consensus among Utah congresspersons for various statewide issues can be achieved regardless of the shape, size, population, history, or demographic makeup of any given district. The specific green congressional plan we have been considering is not the only solution available for achieving the best and strongest possible consensus for representation of Utah in Congress. Any other plan can quite easily bring about the same end. Sixth reason. The proposed green plan has been promoted due to a near perfect population balance as the best option to prevent lawsuits. I will not prepare maps for the purpose of avoiding lawsuits. While I certainly hope legal action does not challenge our work, redistricting with the fear of lawsuits reflects an improper motive and misses the mark of redistricting for the good of the people. I will prepare and promote the very best that I can. Maps that reflect the will of the citizens of Utah and that meet the various legal standards related to our work. I have not and will not walk on eggshells while moving this work forward with a tunnel vision concerned about dodging legal action. My third point, voting and re-voting. The Thursday evening meeting turned out to be very troubling for me. I felt the first couple hours of the meeting were actually highly productive as we voted on and approved our final draft maps for the Senate, House, and school board plans. I felt we were well on track to reach our final 12 maps, despite knowing that opposition was looming. We discussed the congressional plans the same as we had done with Senate, House, and school board plans. We voted the same as we had done with Senate, House, and school board plans. We identified the three highest scoring plans, the same as we had done with Senate, House, and school board plans. For me, the alarming element that emerged was not that the green plan had been resoundingly voted off the island. It was that the commission was even willing to entertain a modified style of voting in order to perhaps throw out the results of a perfectly valid election or voting in order to hold a second voting round for the very same issue of the congressional plans. 20 years ago, Al Gore lost the election, and a lot of people were not happy about it. However, there was not another election to appease the second place crowd. 1 year ago, Donald Trump lost the election, and a lot of people were not happy about it. However, there was not another election to appease the second place crowd. Is our commission now considering a revote to appease a single commissioner? I would hope not. The Thursday night vote we held on the congressional plans was perfectly valid, the same as we had done with Senate, House, and school board plans. And our vote was carried out in a manner consistent with the voting standards of our governing statute. To implement a new methodology for voting again is no different than changing the rules in the middle of the game. And if anything were to invite a lawsuit against this commission, it would certainly be an inconsistent approach to voting up or down the various proposed plans. I understand the informal discussions among all of us that we would hopefully be able to advance a series of plans that would be broad in nature, including at least one congressional plan that would include a roughly balanced urban-rural approach. I had very much wanted this as an outcome myself. However, through our collective vote, this simply did not materialize. If our commission votes to re-vote over a previous vote, then know that I do not approve. In America, we do not keep voting until someone likes the outcome. However, please know that I will stand with this commission regardless of how we proceed. My proposal now to this commission is that we abandon the discussion of voting a second time on our congressional plans, even if it means moving forward without perfect consensus. I am not perfectly happy with the top 3 plans that we did look at the other night. But all 3 plans are still incredibly good plans for representing the citizens. In conclusion, I would rather prepare a series of outstanding maps for my fellow citizens and have them rejected than to know I prepared a series of maps, first to appease the legislature, but secondly, to represent the citizens. If our maps are rejected by the legislature, then any subsequent consequences shall be upon them. But I will at least know that my efforts represented my very best work to model the will of our fellow Utahns, and that I was not influenced by what I thought the legislature might think of my work. Yes, I hope that our maps will be adopted. I have immensely enjoyed working with each of you. I really have. This experience has been among the most challenging and rewarding things I have ever done. And I am looking forward to finishing up our work over the next week or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bishop.
May I make a comment, please?
Please, Commissioner Hilliard.
I didn't understand when we did our ranking and talking about the congressional districts late Thursday night, that we were doing a final vote, that these were the final 3. My impression was that we were just giving our feelings there for a discussion to further. And I think you adjourned the meeting before we really took a vote on it. And I don't know if we're voting a second time or thing, but I think I've been pretty articulate during this whole session that I think we need to give the legislature choices. And if we don't want to do that, then I think we take the risk that we've wasted our time. I would say that for every negative vote on any of the bills, we cut our chances with the legislature by 50%. Now, maybe that's not a criteria. Maybe we don't care that they reject it, but there'll be a reason that they can articulate, I think, very well. Yeah, and again, as I drove home, a couple of things came to my mind that were really clear. Number one is that contrary to what was said here in the meeting, staff has never told us that we're okay. I took it from our law professor who said these plans are all various and take considerations, but I took from his comments, not our staff and not anyone here, that they all cut the mustard. They were all okay. The question is which ones do we want to recommend? I thought that. The second thing I'm really glad for is that we're not making the final choice. I mean, they should have had, I guess from what I've heard, we should have had in the initiative that people signed saying this group will give the final maps and that's what the legislature is going to have to adopt. I suspect now in my district, in the Prop 4 didn't pass. And I'm here doing the will of the people, but when, you know, and I've said this before, I've been really disappointed that we haven't had 500 people here. If this is such a big, important thing to the state of Utah, and we've gone out and done all these meetings, why it isn't. I'm willing to work, but I can tell you quite frankly, as I looked over those maps and saw the big rural areas that are not represented, I understand the issue. The United States Supreme Court said one man, one vote. And I think that we know by constitutional law is very, very important. We can talk about conflicts or community of interest and talk about other things, but that's really got to be a bottom line item we do. But I look at another way too, and I was impressed by the woman who testified at Harriman, who'd worked for a legislative staff, who said, if you give one congressman this big district, there's no way they can service their people. So what you've done in the big rural areas, you've disadvantaged those people because they will not have the attention a congressman can give if you're in an isolated district in Salt Lake. And so that those congressmen or women can better serve and give the people more what they want than if you got a big district. So I don't care if there's a district in there that puts Salt Lake in primarily one or split it, as long as there's an option for the legislature to see. And I'm not happy with the ones I approved for the completely happy. I should say I'm generally happy, not completely happy with all the maps, but that's part of a political process of dealing with the reality of life. I mean, I'm not the king. I don't make these decisions, but I will be hard pressed to vote for the committee if we recommend basically do the same thing, because I think we are not doing what the initiative said, that we would have 3 maps. And if they intended them all be the same, they should have said 1.
Commissioner Durham.
I see this as a matter of process. First of all, I disagree with Commissioner Hilliard's perception that Professor Persley spoke to the gerrymandering issue. I don't think it was part of any of the data we looked at or his conclusions. Second of all, I would emphasize that all of us have agreed and taken an oath. In fact, I think we had an oath to follow the standards and the statutory requirements. And I think we've all been very conscientious about trying to do that. But, and then third of all, and on this voting issue, we do have an interesting question on the congressional votes, because we've got a couple of new maps in. And so it might be that we want to take some time to put those into consideration. But when it comes to voting on them, we are required to send maps to the legislature that only receive a majority vote of the commission. And this notion that we can have, that we can vote for a category. Now, I don't know, maybe if one of you wants to put a motion on the table that the commission follow the category system, we could vote on that and agree to go with the majority, but nobody's done that.
Although I will note that we don't have an action item to be able to do that today, so.
Okay, that's good to know, but that's something to consider. But I'm certainly not going to agree to this, to the idea that because one or more commission members want to do it that way, I have to do it that way. That would have to be a commission decision. And I still don't know whether that, and maybe we need a legal opinion from council on whether that would qualify for the majority vote for each map going to the legislature. So I think we've got to work out those process issues. And I really thank my fellow commissioner, Commissioner Baker, for helping us focus on those voting issues. I think they're very important, and I think we need to be clear about how we're going to proceed.
Yes, and we have asked council to give us some guidance on the voting issues under the statute. I don't know if Matt, if you're ready to do that now. Oh, I guess we should close the public comment.
And could we take a 10-minute break?
And yes, that's a good idea. Let's take a short break. So we'll first close the public comment. So again, we appreciate everybody who came out. We will continue to have a public meeting after a short break. And we'll give you a little bit of leeway on figuring out how long it'll take. So. Gordon.
I like to say I could see all your smiling faces, but we're wearing masks. So what we want to do is Matt Cannon has a short presentation on the votes, on the voting procedure of the statute. And then the intent was to maybe look at our congressional maps again. So that's kind of up to the commission. We have that on the agenda as a discussion of map selection. So we can do that. But let me have Matt come up. Joey, do you have his PowerPoint ready?
Commissioner Durham, did you have a comment?
Oh,
Well, when we get to the maps, we have to discuss what we're going to do with the new maps that have come in that we haven't had a chance to review.
Yes, thank you.
Right. Good afternoon, commissioners. And as Gordon stated, he's asked me to present very briefly on the statutory process for selecting the recommended maps. And on your screen, you'll see a PowerPoint. I have been in, Professor Persley has been listening online, and I just got off the phone with him, and he wanted me to make just one clarification as to Thursday's night meeting, just to give his understanding of what occurred with respect to any opinion or evaluation as to whether or not any of the congressional maps satisfy any political kind of undue favoring or disfavoring. And it's his recollection, and that at no point has he provided an opinion as to whether or not all of the congressional maps that were considered satisfy any kind of political criteria of undue favoring or disfavoring. And so he just wanted to make that clear. Now, there was obviously a lot of discussion on the other criteria, so it's understandable during that conversation why it may be interpreted that he's signing off on everything, but he just wanted to make clear with respect to political data, as well as, RQN and our legal counsel, we've made no analysis on that. Commissioner Hilliard.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I guess I assumed that had there been a gerrymandering problem, he would have said it to us. That's what I guess I made you assume. When he talked about the things, that was never even raised as an issue. Now, I guess one of the problems is we don't have the political information. There's no way I can look at these maps and say this favors the Republicans or the Democrats, and we purposely made it that way. But I would have assumed that had there been any gerrymandering problem with the process or what we did, he would have told us. And that's what I assumed.
Well, and I think that's understandable. And we're obviously walking this delicate line of trying to comply with the statute of what information to provide to you. The commission has obviously adopted a standard that says it will not consider any political data in the creation of the maps. But we all know standard 6 and the statute provides that there will be no purposeful or undue favoring or disfavoring. And that's where it gets more complicated then. And we've done some analysis that we've provided to the chair, and we may, at some point need to cross that line as to, what that analysis can and should be under those circumstances. But I guess the point with respect to the congressional is he was not making any, and part of it was because I don't think he knew which maps would go forward. Now, with respect to the other 3, I think maybe that is a safer assumption to say if there were an outlier with respect, or potential outlier with respect to potential undue favoring or disfavoring with respect to the school board, Senate, or state house, then perhaps that would have been raised by somebody. And the fact that it wasn't raised, I can see perhaps that's the assumption that, those are fine. But we're trying to be very delicate not to make that representation to you until absolutely necessary because of the practical impact of making that type of statement of, okay, what do we do now with this map that may run the risk of not complying with one of the statutory requirements of undue favoring. And with respect to congressional, there's been no statement or evaluation that's been presented to you by legal or by Mr. Pursley, that those are all in compliance. And so the assumption there is there may be some that may not be in compliance potentially with that, and we may have to cross that bridge at some point.
What would you suggest if that happens? Because if we go to, say, for example, it comes back and says, number one is so predominantly Republican, we need to change it. I'd have no idea what to do in 2 and 3 and 4 to balance that out unless I knew what they were. And that gets us into areas that I have not wanted to go, and I don't think the committee should go.
Well, and that's what we're trying to balance from that practical standpoint, because you raise a good point. Once that information is disclosed to the commission that a particular map appears to arguably undue favor or disfavor a political party, the question becomes, well, how can you then, if you want to try to fix that map without considering political data, and you'd be stabbing in the dark, and perhaps be able to make changes that we could then, staff could check later to say, okay, this now appears to be, in compliance. But there also is that statutory, requirement in Standard 6 that says that any map submitted shall not unduly favor or disfavor. And so I think what the staff has done is done a good job in trying to kind of keep an eye on that to make sure that the commission is complying with their statutory obligations, but not bringing it to the commission's attention until absolutely necessary, because of that point you've exactly said, is once we say that about a particular map, then your options are really limited as to, okay, what are we going to do with that map?
Well, could I just inquire of the chair, when are we going to have that discussion? And the reason I ask is that when this first came up several meetings ago, I was taking the view that the statute required looking at the maps submitted, and others, my learned colleague on the bench, Judge Thorne, pushed back very hard and said, no, it's just in the preparation of the maps. And so I was persuaded, and I shut off my mouth to tab uno at the last hearing. And now I think I'm hearing, I haven't seen the letter that you've been sent, but I think there might be a different view on that. And so I just want to know when we're going to get to that.
Sure. My thought was that we would address that issue on Monday. But
Okay, that's fine.
But if there is a preference, we could talk about it more now. But
No, I'm fine.
But
to
I
do
think
it.
council is preparing to talk about it Monday.
Great. That's fine with me.
Yeah, we're happy to respond, and it's one of the many challenges that this commission has faced in trying to balance those types of things, but it is probably an issue that may have to, a bridge that may have to be crossed at some point with respect to that. Any other questions on that, Commissioner Hilliard or anyone else?
I guess as I'm sitting here thinking about it, one of the problems I have, assume for a minute that 3 districts are strongly Republican and 1 is strongly Democrat. Does that mean we need to go through all 4 of the districts and make sure they're more competitive? Or does it mean we have to offset 2 of the Republicans to make them so that they were more competitive? So that's kind of the worm I'm really concerned as we get into this, because I don't know how you define that. And I've said all along, you get a Republican vote for Mitt Romney and a Republican vote for Donald Trump, and they're really vastly different. And registration. I know in my area, I have a number of people registered Republicans simply so they can vote in the primary. I mean, if you were to take them away from there and say, they'd probably say they're independent. Some even would say they're Democrats, but they want to vote in the Republican primary. And so if you take the number of registered Republicans, the number of registered Democrats, it would come out really quite different than how the voting actually turns out. So it's really a can of worms that I really don't want to get into. I think once we start it, I don't really think we'll ever see the end. Maybe what we have to do is just do as we do. And then if the legislature finds that our map somehow did not result in being fair, that they can just disregard them without giving us a chance to go back and try to redo them.
And I think we'll have that discussion on Monday as to kind of those exact type of questions, as how that type of analysis is done. And certainly the commission would also need to further define what undue favoring or disfavoring means. And so we'll present those options and kind of how we interpret the statute, first of all, as your legal counsel, both Professor Personally and Ray Quinney, as to what the statute requires of the commission with respect to that requirement and standard. And then, under the statute, when you evaluate, it gives kind of some direction as to, okay, here's how you are best to try to evaluate. So we'll address those, and you're absolutely correct that it's a tricky issue, but an important issue, and one that I know the commission wants to get right on all accounts. Unless there's any additional questions on that issue, I just wanted to move briefly through the statutory process for selecting the recommended maps, as requested by Gordon. And I think you're all familiar with the statute that outlines this process in 20A20-3023. And just going to the next slide there, Joey, that's outlines the process. And it's basically a fairly simple process. And the next slide, it says, to the extent possible, each map recommended by the commission shall be approved by at least 5 members of the commission. So that's our first charge in selecting the maps, is to the extent possible, each map recommended shall have at least 5 members vote in favor of that. Going to the next slide, it accounts for a situation if the commission is unable to attain the approval of at least 5 members, then the process is as follows. So subsection I there says, if possible, the commission is to recommend one map that is approved by at least 5 members of the commission. So if you can't get all 3, they're saying, well, let's see if you can get one. And then to the next slide, it says that the commission is to recommend the 2 additional maps that are approved by a majority of commission members as follows. And so one map is to be approved by a majority that includes the commission member described in subsection 2012F. So that would be Commissioner Baker. And one of the maps shall be approved by a majority. And so this is 4 as well, that includes the commission member described in 2012G, which would be Commissioner Thorne. And so that is the extent. I've provided you the entire statutory language of that process. Now there's obviously some scenarios that could arise that may lead to questions. I think it's probably best to cross that bridge when we get there, so as not to necessarily overcomplicate. But we're definitely looking at that closely, and we'll be prepared for our kind of legal interpretation of what to happen if there's somehow this process as defined doesn't result in 12 maps getting the approval as outlined in the statute.
So just for to make sure we're all getting on similar pages anyway. My assumption was that the set of maps that we talked about on Thursday night will still need a formal vote to make sure that we've crossed those thresholds. Now, we had a voting process that allowed us to get it down to those 3, but we would still need to have a formal vote to be compliant with the statute, is my understanding. Is that a reasonable reading?
I think that's a reasonable reading. I think having participated in that meeting, I can see why there may have been some confusion as to kind of the impact or the intention of that vote. Because there's certainly all that the statute requires is that if there's 5 individuals who are in favor of a particular map, then that meets that requirement. Or if you can't get all 5, that there's 4. And I can't remember if there was an issue where, so assuming that there were 5 votes for each of the 3 maps and the first 3 map types, that could be argued as, okay, that was the approval. It sounds like the chair is envisioning another vote of those 3 because there was many who voted elsewhere and it wasn't.
Yeah, in part, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what the best option is to make sure we do comply with the statute.
Well, and also I think a lot of the discussion was initially of, hey, we're unanimous, going to put these forth, even though we may not agree or have voted for it, that once we've identified the three, that the idea was to have some sort of unanimity as to those maps put forth. And so that would obviously solve kind of any issue as to, well, that this particular map didn't get 5 because the intent was, let's see if we can find 3 maps that we can unanimously agree on sending forward to the legislature of each of those first 3 map types. Now, I think as Commissioner Hilliard mentioned today, his understanding was a little different, that, hey, we're maybe narrowing down 3 and not necessarily having a final vote on those 3. And so I think based on that and other things in the chair's understanding, at some point, if it's not unanimous, there will at least be some action from this commission that says, yes, each of these maps that we're submitting has the votes required under the statute. And whether that happened on Thursday or not is a little unclear.
Am I to understand the vote we took, or votes we took on Thursday night, was an opinion vote, or was it a binding vote? As well, let me clarify. For the school board, the Senate, and the House maps, those 3 seem to be clear. But now I'm hearing that maybe that was just an opinion vote and not a binding vote.
I think to be binding, you'd have to have 5 votes, or at least 4 with either you or me voting for a particular map. But I had thought what we were doing Thursday was trying to put forward consensus maps that we could unanimously as a commission move forward.
No, I thought the process with respect to the first 3 categories, school board, Senate, and House, was a selection vote. And in fact, we referred those maps to the cleanup process and asked for some changes in various ones of them, but I didn't think they were still under consideration for submission. With respect to the congressional vote, I'm not quite sure what we did. Other than people were asked to indicate their 3 maps. And then we looked at those final scores. With respect to that, I'm a little bit unclear whether that vote was a straw vote or a selection vote. And I just don't know. So I guess I'd have to defer to the chair on that.
I can remember asking for clarification for the congressional map. Were we voting for the 3 that we thought were the best, or the 3 that we wanted to move forward as a package? And so that indicated to me.
What answer did you get from whom?
I think it was the chair.
And I think it was the 3 that you liked the best, as opposed to the 3 that we should move forward.
That's perfectly possible in terms of what my recollection is.
And let me just tell you, so one of the things that was in my mind, I wasn't sure when we went into the process that we're going to come out with a total of 3 maps. I thought there would be a situation where we might end up with 4 maps and but as we were voting, it seemed to come down to the 3 maps, which I may have gotten very excited and a little bit giddy thinking.
No, I think he's talking about this Senate House.
Excuse me, the Senate School District and the State House. And so my envisioning was that I wasn't confident going into that meeting, we were going to get down to our 3. And so I was thinking that there might be a couple maps that.
Yeah, but nobody was informed it was a straw vote.
What's that?
No one was informed that was a straw vote.
No, I'm not saying a straw vote. I thought we may end up seeing like 1 map with 5, 1 with 4, and 2 with 3. And so we'd end up with 4 maps that would ultimately need to be selected. But what we saw was a little different what I envisioned. I saw a majority of maps. And so at that point, I thought, okay, we are able to get to a consensus quicker and we're not having to move forward 4 maps. And so my doubt of you caused me to think that we needed to maybe have a final vote by Monday. And so we'd put that in the agenda because I thought you might have 3 of the school district, but 4 of the House and maybe 4 of the Senate at the end of that meeting, because I didn't know we would you would be so efficient with your voting.
Well, I would assume that at the end of the selection votes, we would then have a vote to submit all 12, if we have them, to the legislature, but I don't think those would be an opportunity to change your vote on individual maps, but
Yeah, and so the fact that we additionally moved those. So any miscommunication was probably, a little bit engendered
Okay,
by me
you
on
can have
that,
it.
but
You can have it.
again, because like I said, I doubted your efficiency in the voting process. And so I was,
Did we end up with 5 votes in favor of 3 maps in each category?
yeah, and so I didn't recognize that, so I was thinking, oh, great, we'll have a final vote on this package, because it seems like we were, like you said, nobody was totally happy with every map, but it was enough that there was confidence to move forward.
If I may, let me make a motion
Okay.
that on our agenda Monday, because I don't think we can do anything today because it's not an action item on our agenda, that we put it on for an action agenda. And I intend to make a motion that we approve the 3 maps that we have talked about for the for the school board, the House, and the Senate. And I think it would be important for our commission that we have an actual recorded vote, that everybody voted on those, so we know that. I intend to make that motion. Then I think the question about the congressional maps, I think we need to look at some of the material that came in today. I think we need to look at that. And for example, had I known that these were the 3, I don't know if I had any of the 3 up there. I probably would have said, now, wait a minute, if I'm going to look at these and mine aren't here, let me reestablish how my votes are going to be with the 3 or 4 that are still up there. And I would feel more comfortable if we had a discussion there with the intent that we would vote either unanimous or whatever there may be. And that's my motion. We direct the chair to do that on the agenda come Monday.
And again, to what Jeff or Commissioner Baker has said earlier, I think my initial instructions were along the line you were saying. And then through the process, it morphed into final voting, because I felt that, I was just excited that we were getting, these 5 votes. And I thought, okay, we're down. But the initial instruction that I think I tried to portray was that we were just doing a culling of the herd as opposed to a final selection. However,
That's my understanding.
that's what I tried to portray. I know, and I'm not saying I communicated that well. Okay. And so I apologize for that aspect of it. And I think that was a mistake on my part. So what I'm suggesting is we did get 5 votes on 3 different maps for those state elections. And I think if those are good, it may not hurt to have an official vote on an action item on Monday to make those solid and finish up the congressional maps. It's up to you. That in my instructions, I thought I was saying we wanted to use this unanimous vote and send a full package to the legislature. And anyway, was not clear. We need a good attorney to explain the words I'm trying to say.
When I said there'd be an audit on this vote, you laughed at me.
What'd I say?
When I said there's going to be an audit on this vote, you laughed at me. You're not laughing now.
No, I'm not laughing now. Listen, we're auditing every vote. So there's audits going everywhere. So I think you're out of budget though. No, that's a joke.
I think the motion I have would be to direct the chair to set this in as an action item to approve all of them. And so we have a record vote, aye, nay, whatever. So we have it for each one of us. My intention would be to make a motion. We approve the 3 that we've talked about in that as we've done it. And then I think the discussion on the congressional maps, we need to get the information that came in today that I'm sure we'll get some more during this week. And then let's sit down, we can talk about the ones. Then I know that I haven't just listed some up there for culling, as you talked about. But we've actually set what we really want to do, so we know the votes are done.
Okay.
That's my motion.
Okay. Anyway, I'll let you guys decide what you
Certainly
want to
willing
do.
to entertain that. Are there, kind of other perspectives of concern. I know Commissioner Baker, we've heard your issues that you raised earlier, and I appreciate those.
What else are you doing today?
To Washington State.
Well, yeah, there's a football game, but
Can I just say one thing?
you may.
Not on point. Because I thought this was going to be a very important meeting. That's why I wore my formal hoodie. And I just want to know that the commission, I have nothing but the most resounding respect for the amount of time and effort this body has put into it. I think there are some, as we've heard today, I think there's some structural flaws we have as a commission to be addressed with, but I am very much respectful of everyone for what they have done in this commission. I am also wholly respectful of the staff. I think Gordon has, whatever job you're going to go to after this gig is up, you have a recommendation of how efficient and effective you've been. And especially to the kids that have been on staff, to the interns and the students. I don't know if I've ever seen a group of people who worked harder, were more helpful. And I mean, that has been the very plus of what we're about to do. So I just want to be on record as saying that is important to me.
Well,
and I don't know how long I'll be with you, but that is important to me.
Thank you. And I agree. I think that is a very important piece of this puzzle that has worked out very, very well for us.
Just a point of order.
Please.
I was seated at the far end, so I don't think I ever saw a total vote. I'm assuming that all those names are adopted by 5, but I didn't see the voting process. So if somebody at some point could just give me totals for the different things.
Yeah,
would feel much more
I hope you saved those sheets of paper.
So yes, we can.
Some of them were a little hard to decipher, but I think I got it all.
And I think as I tried to make sure that the commission was complying with everything in the statute, one angle through which the attorneys were looking at this is that once those are actually submitted, the assumption is you're only going to submit those maps that do qualify. And based on a prior discussion of some possibility that, okay, whatever 3 we agree on, we're going to submit as a unanimous voice. Once those 3 were identified, then the assumption was, okay, each of the commissioners would put forth their support for each of those 3 in moving those forward. So obviously room for misunderstanding and other issues, but that I think is another angle that we are saying, hey, this is, you're going to comply when you send those maps to the legislature, having ensured that you're not going to send any maps that don't have that support that's necessary.
Gordon, is it the case that the 3 top vote getters were all unanimous, or was it just that they had 5? Okay, so that's.
They were
yeah,
5. There was
they were
none
5.
above 5, I believe. So.
But the notion that whatever 3 would be would then get the unanimous support of the commission was kind of how I said, okay, they're going to comply with the statute. But
just a quick question. So we had a total of 9 maps that received a minimum of 5 votes each. Is that correct? Did I understand that right? Okay, that's all I want to know is just 9 maps each had 5 votes. 5 plus votes.
And we'll want to absolutely make sure of that. But even if they didn't initially have the 5 votes initially, once those 3 rose to the top, regardless of how they got there, if the commission still says we're putting, or the intention was with getting those top 3, that these are going to be the 3 that we're all agreeing to submit, at least with those map types, at that point, it to me becomes moot whether it had 5 votes, 6 votes, or 7 votes, because at that point they all have 7 votes as you submit them forward. But some clarity would be helpful.
And it got there. Some of the votes were moved after votes, to get them to the 5. And so that's why I thought, in my mind, I didn't, it was more, we had one that didn't have 5 and then votes were moved. I just changed it. By the voter, the vote. I didn't do it. No, listen. Hey, the audit, don't make me get audited.
Yes, you're going to be audited.
I could see that.
Now, the issue is here, set the standard of how we're going to do it. I think for those 3 sets of maps, we still, I don't hear anyone that's in disagreement that we've actually kind of made a decision. We're going to go forward with them. However, you ask us to put our 3 tops. If you had actually said, okay, how many like this map and how many like the second map and how many like the third map, you could have had 7 or 8 maps with 5 votes. Yeah. So it depends on how you establish the criteria ahead of time and whether that can be done by consensus or not becomes significant.
Yeah.
All right.
So, okay, well, I was just going to say, with your motion on the table, if you wanted to restate your motion as well, so in your comments.
My motion would be that we direct the chair of the committee to set as an action item on Monday's commission meeting, the approval of all the 4 areas we're talking about. And I intend to make a motion that we approve the 3 that we've done for the House, the Senate, and the school board, because I think they were unanimous on those. But I think it's important that our commission go on record with an actual vote, so we know how each of us voted. I think on the 4th one, I'm not intending to make that motion because I think I need more information from the new ones that are brought in and to discuss it, because I want to look at the maps itself. But one of the things that I have discovered as I took the maps home and looked at them more carefully, there are a lot of things I didn't like and I could change them. We're all that way. But I'm really deeply concerned about these rural areas of southern Utah that has miles and miles of acreage that some poor legislators or congressman is going to have to service with his staff. And I think that's really totally unfair to somebody who may be living in Uinta or may be living in
Hey, they
someplace.
know what district they're running for, Lyle. It's not like it's a surprise.
And it's easy to handle. You just get lobbyists to give you money and take care of all those costs you do.
That's the
And
way it's done.
I don't like that. I mean, I think that the congressman ought to be paid for their staff. We ought to do something without that. But I just taking that, and that's, we'll talk about that Monday. That's my motion.
Okay.
So discussion on that motion, I would be willing to second that motion, although I think it should be clear how we are going to discuss and ultimately decide on the congressional maps then for Monday.
I just left that open to how it's going to happen.
So we still have some data that we just received today on the congressional maps. And I think we also heard that we have at least 2 new maps that were submitted today as well. And I think we'd like to be able to consider those, is what I'm hearing from some of my colleagues. And so I think what we need to do is to be able to get the data on those and then be able to have a full conversation, and then considering the new maps, make a formal vote among the maps.
Right, and I would add to that to, I guess, oh no, Soraya and Joey are both there. We've gotten pretty adept at using these giant printouts, and if we need printouts for all the new maps, but you don't need to run them to our houses. If you just bring them to the meeting on Monday, we'll come early and get through them quickly.
And just to clarify too, or just to restate then, so for the vote that we ultimately want to take on Monday, for not just the 3 maps, but also the congressional map after our discussion, we know that those maps can be sent forward if we have a 5-7 vote for at least one of those maps.
Or a 5-2 vote.
Or a 5-2, and then a 4-3 vote for the others.
Yes, as long as on the 4-3, we
We
have
have either,
one that's supported
exactly.
by one of the independents and one supported by the other.
Okay, great. All right, well, I will second Commissioner Hilliard's motion.
Okay.
I want something.
As a note of order to council, as this is not a formal action item on our agenda, do I need to take any further action, or can I just proceed and make sure we do that?
You may proceed.
Okay, so I will proceed with your marching orders to make sure we have that vote for the three sets of maps that we already discussed and agreed on. And then we will have a more robust conversation with additional data on the congressional maps, together with the information from Moon and colleagues on the new maps as well, I would hope.
One point of clarification, do we need to bring the congressional maps that we have now in addition to the new ones? Or will we have a new packet of things that have the same information on each, just for, so I know what I'm doing?
Bring your old congressional maps. That just save, we're gonna be greener.
Well, and some of us have written notes on them and.
And perhaps, Mr. Chair, I mean, I know we're going in Monday morning to map, so there may be some tweaks actually to the purple for.
Yeah.
three.
Yeah, so if there are refinements that you make before the meeting, we could probably coordinate.
Yeah,
with
if you
staff to
make
get
some
a new
refinements,
printout,
we'll print those out.
as necessary. Okay. At 4 o'clock on Monday at the Taylorsville office building.
And
Yeah,
would you through
yeah.
before 11:20?
And we'll be finished before 11:20. Yeah.
What time I got home?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to know what time you got home. I just hope your wife wasn't waiting up for you, making home you were safe. So bless her heart as well. Okay. So I think we've got marching orders for the next couple of days. Staff, we appreciate your efforts to make sure we're able to pull this off. And at the same time, you've got a report that's being drafted. And I think we might talk a little bit about that on Monday as well as start talking about a presentation that we'll be giving a week from Monday.
Both those will be on the agenda.
Okay.
But only one action item, that'll be maps.
Okay. Any other items for discussion? Please,
Mr.
Commissioner.
Chair, just the discussion about the actual report and that you will give us a draft so that we can all look at that and suggest any edits perhaps if we
Oh, yeah.
want that.
This is your
So,
report.
so just a timeline on that. I'm just curious about that, just because I know that you may have to submit by a week from today.
No, we plan to submit at the same time.
Oh, you can do it at the same time. Okay.
So the
wonderful.
report will go in. So two things are going to be given to you. One is the report, but also the staff has been writing up a description of each of your districts. And what we are going to give you is each team's going to get a description of their districts. And so we need you to add in why you put the line there.
Sure.
Or if we said the wrong reason, put the right reason in.
Each district or each map?
Each district. So we have a summary of the map and then each district. So when you look at your house district, you'll have 75 descriptions that are probably 100% accurate.
We're going to submit the maps and report on the 30th.
Yeah, the maps and report go in on the 30th.
So we will deliver the maps and the report on Saturday, the 30th. So 1 week from today is when we will deliver.
Sorry,
the maps.
yes. And then the first we'll do the presentation.
So, and I would appreciate, Councilman Gordon, if you can help us coordinate with LRGC to figure out where in the world we're going to deliver them on a Saturday, and how we're going to just mechanically take care of that.
Certainly. I'll reach out to their council and figure that out.
Okay, thank you. Please, Commissioner Baker.
So if we approve final maps on Monday, is this going to preclude or slow down or
Clean up?
Yes, the cleanup efforts.
I would hope not.
I would hope not too. Fine tuning we need to do on some of the orange maps. That Bill and I
I would think that once the map's adopted, the motion could carry that the maps can be continually cleaned up by their respective teams or their stewards of those maps, that work can go clear to Friday.
Just a final vote from the commission. Same these are the ones we want to go for.
And with the caveat that they can continually be modified by the stewards of those maps, per what Commissioner Baker's saying.
You may recall that when we did the house maps, I talked about looking at Roosevelt and Clearfield. Because those are two areas that we heard some concern about. And so I think Commissioner Thorne and I will look at that to see if there's any changes that need to be made. I think we do make changes. Obviously, we need to let the rest of the commissioners know, but I suspect there will be some fine tuning involved.
I think you know the kind of changes you all would make.
But I think Commissioner Thorne is also raising an issue that if we make changes, how do we define substantive changes that would have to be revetted for the whole commission?
I just think that whatever map we send up to the legislature needs to have a final stamp from the commission saying, this is what we've done. I think before now, it's a process that we're going to fine tune these things. But at some point, I think before they go up there, we need a final vote saying, this is in fact what we have done.
So perhaps
Not that it's going to change,
yeah,
but just that there's a final stamp that the legislature knows is completed.
okay. So perhaps next Friday.
Friday night, we could have a meeting, very short, and each of you will come in and sign the report and the final maps and have a final vote on the final form of the final maps.
4 o'clock again.
And that's final.
Yes, you can't make any changes after that, Commissioner Baker.
I can see Jeff in there Saturday, cranking the last few changes out.
What time Friday? 4?
The chair is going to tell us, but I think 4 is a good time.
Yeah. Unless anybody has any objections, 4 o'clock.
That's another $60, guys.
I'll give you 120 if I don't have to come.
You want to do it remotely? I need your signature, man.
On Friday, do we have just kind of a general timeline? If we start at 4, what time we could complete our business?
Trick or treat.
I have some prior commitments that have been made for several months, and I just want to
I'm
make sure that
thinking
I'm
this is
fulfilling
just-
my duty here.
I'm
but-
thinking this is just, we could let each commission team talk about the changes they made to the extent that you feel necessary. And then it's a final vote and you go home. So I think it's just describing the changes that took place from tomorrow night to Friday. Anything that was done to the maps during that 4 days. And there can be a lot of damage in 4 days, so it might need a lot of, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, we could
Could
meet earlier.
Could we
if that
try to
would-
meet earlier?
Oh,
If-
we
if
can
it's-
meet anytime. Yeah,
If
I
it's
just,
possible, and if it's, I know that it may,
Yeah,
that may be difficult for,
we could
Yeah,
do
I
it at
I looked at
lunch.
my colleagues who,
Judges in Washington State at 1 o'clock. So
at when.
so from 1 to when?
1 to 3
1 to 3?
person, virtually.
I'm free for any time. I'm
Even
good
if
all
we
day
did,
Friday.
even if we did 3:30, if that gives you enough time, Commissioner. That if it works for everybody else, an earlier
Could we do
time would be.
3:30? Okay. So we'll do 3:30. That gives us a little more of a window for Commissioner Hale.
That would be great.
We won't
Thank
put
you.
anything else on the agenda. No public comment. It's over.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't even know if you get a bottle of water that meeting. We were just going to get you in, get you out.
Let me tell you,
Please.
I would assume, because we have no statutory real rules, we set up our kind of our own rules. I think I'm okay if Jeff reads it and says, hey, I'm fine, I don't want to come in, that we could have somebody sign for him and some type of thing like that. Oh, yuck. Yuck.
Hey, I want you driving down from one more time.
Okay, just keep the sheep off the road and man away.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion? Yeah. Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
This meeting is hereby